Chapter 1801. Ginger? G said. There must be more good words outside. I sneeze so much. A yawn. They must be saying bad things about me. Wuxia. He wanted to say that with his lord's ability to attract hatred, she would probably say half of the good and half of the bad. Didn't she have any idea what was going on? Countless gentry families that had been suppressed by her secretly cursed her bad luck. However, her marketing skills were outstanding. Not only did she give herself the title of the Child of Destiny, she even gave the child in her womb the title of the reincarnation of the North Star. Once the child was born, no matter how many more children they had in the future, they would not be able to defeat this one. The halo was too powerful. Not to mention fighting for it, they probably couldn't even think of fighting for it. But, will it be bad for the child if he's too famous? Wuxia was afraid that he would carelessly praise the child to death while raising her. Moreover, the one who would be praised to death was his own mother. That would be a pain in the ass. Ginger? G twirled the toothpick and bared her teeth. What's wrong with it? Children should be cool. Otherwise, why would I call you my child? Wuxia. If the child were to die from excessive praise, the mother would be the main culprit. After all, everything is unpredictable. Just like Wei Tsong in his previous life, Wuxia did not want this child. To be precise, he did not expect to have this child. It would be fine if it was a girl, but if it was a boy, not only would it shake Her Highness Jiangyan's legitimate status, but it would also threaten His Majesty's life. The situation in the court could not tolerate such a legitimate son. When he found out that this child was specially born by Her Majesty to continue the Wei family's lineage, Wuxi's emotions were so complicated that he could not be sorted out. Of course, the child could not be ruled out as Her Majesty's entrapment, but half of it was planned for Wuxia. With this thought in mind, Wuxia felt that it was a great gift from the heavens and did not dare to ask for anything else. He wanted to raise Wei Tsong well. Other than status and honor, Wuxia had done everything he could. She hoped that he would spend the rest of his life as a famous scholar, doing what he wanted to do and traveling around the world. They didn't have to endure the pain of separation in a chaotic world, and they didn't have to endure the predicament of hunger and cold. Life was like floating clouds, free and unrestrained. Now that he thought about it, Wuxia had been too subjective and had forgotten that Wei Tsong was not him. What he gave the child might not be what the child wanted. Now, my lord, in this life, I only want this one. The second one was destined to be the threat of boss. Incense offerings and whatnot could go to hell. In his previous life, Wuxia did not cling to the family line. Otherwise, he would not have been targeted by Her Majesty when he was still single at the age of 30, right? With such a damned fate that cursed his entire family, he would have long laid flat and let fate trample all over him. If another Wei Tsong appeared, they would still end up with the same outcome. Ginger? After Ji Yunshu finished picking her teeth, she told him some bad news. This is a twin. You can't just have one. Wuxia was speechless. Ginger? Ji said. Didn't I say that the dragon and phoenix in my dreams entered my arms? No matter if the dragon and phoenix were male or female, there would definitely be two. Wuxia said with difficulty. Dragon and phoenix entering one's bosom. Isn't that just nonsense, my lord? There was no such dream. Ginger? Ji Yunshu nodded. The dream is nonsense, but the essence is real. Wuxia was confused again. Since ancient times, there has never been a twin who inherited the throne. They looked exactly the same. What a good basic condition for usurping the throne. If they encountered a damned emperor or prince who swapped identities, wouldn't the imperial court and imperial harem be in a mess? If one was a dragon and one was a phoenix, it would be a good omen. What if the two children were of the same gender? There were similar records in the past. When an imperial concubine gave birth to twin dragons, one would drown. Otherwise, both would lose the right to inherit the throne. Ginger? Ji said indifferently. Then let's set an example with these two children. The old chief had to take a fancy to a small farm or something. It was a dream to expect a woman who ran around the world to stay in a strange and backward ancient world for the rest of her life. It was impossible to fight for the throne. Ji Yunshu was afraid that the old chief would tie her daughter up and tie her to the dragon throne to threaten her. underscore smiley face, angle, underscore ever since she deduced that the old chief might come, Ginger? Ji Yunshu secretly made a plan. 1 2 3 4 5. It was rare to be able to exploit this fellow. If she didn't take the opportunity to take advantage of him, she was afraid that she wouldn't have another chance in the future. Thinking that her daughter would have to live under the shadow of the great devil in the future. Ginger? Ji Yunshu pitied this child. Wuxia said. But Ginger? Ji Yunshu stroked her belly and said. Don't worry. We have to believe in miracles. Wuxia, not at all underscore smiley face, angle, underscore be Ginger? When Ji Yunshu's news reached the troops stationed in Nanxing and Zhongzhao's front line, everyone had different reactions. Fu Wang was calm. Jiang. Ji Yunshu was unmarried and had no children. This commander had never joined the army to hasten births. He only recognized this one lord. The baby young lord was nothing. It didn't matter whether he had or not. When Yang Si received the news, he was bathing in the bathtub. In his excitement, he knocked over the bathtub. When he got up from the ground, he opened the door and ordered the butler to prepare food and wine to celebrate. The butler looked at the fair and smooth old master. His expression was indescribable. What kind of look is that? Your old master is still strong. Yang Si slammed the door, blocking the old butler's line of sight. The old butler. He couldn't help but ask a question from the depths of his soul. What was in the old master's head all day? Yang Tao, Yin Lin and the others were slightly shocked, but their reactions were still calm. Is the news reliable? Yang Tao had been busy training the troops all day. He was so tired that he was sweating all over. He didn't even bother to take off his armor. The smell was so strong that only his wife and good friend Yin Lin didn't mind. He sat cross-legged and massaged his sore feet. Yin Lin said reliable. The news was sent by Qian Su, who had escorted his wife and children to Wanzhou. How could it not be reliable? Yang Tao accidentally popped his blister. The pain made him grimace, but he felt good afterward. Isn't that a good thing? With a young lord, the people will feel at ease. Otherwise, her position will be shaken sooner or later. Yen Lin glanced at his good friend who was getting more and more impolite. He said coldly, "You're quite open-minded." Yang Tao said, "What else can I do? Betray her?" Yen Lin. He pressed down on the blue veins on his forehead. "Zhengzi, don't get too close to those boorish country bumpkins." Listen to Yang Tao's elegant words. What kind of accent is that? For Yen Lin, who was fastidious about pronunciation and had terminal OCD, this was torture. If this went on, their friendship would be over. Among the crowd, only Qiguan Rang had the most unusual reaction. He ran to the tower with a few jars of wine and drank for the whole night. Drunk, he was carried down and huddled in his bed in the middle of the night. The next day, when Qiguan Rang recalled how drunk he was, he looked a little hopeless. Old Master Sun didn't expose him. He asked, "Did you get what you wanted?" Qiguan Rang, who had always been gloomy and cold, smiled. "Not yet." "Not yet," Qiguan Rang said. "The world hasn't been unified yet. It's not perfect." The world had been unified. She hadn't ascended to the throne yet. It wasn't perfect. After ascending to the throne, the Golden Age hadn't arrived yet. Chapter 1802. This year was of great significance. It was destined to be recorded in the annals of history, and leave a strong mark in the long river of history. Whether it was Jiang Ji's feeling of pregnancy, the purple star from heaven, the loss of half of Zhongzhao in more than 20 days, or the successful completion of the first imperial examination, this batch of scholars officially entered the official career. In a sense, it could almost be regarded as the beginning of a new era. Later generations could peek at a part of this special era from the history books, but those who lived in this era experienced everything firsthand. "Brother Rongli, I really can't bear to part with you." Tenli Pavilion outside the city. Changsheng was not shy at all as she wrapped her arms around Feng Yi's neck. Her eyes were rippling with reluctance. "I still don't understand why Lord Jiang sent you so far away. What's the difference from being sent to the border?" Feng Yi raised her hand to steady Changsheng's waist. Her hand was almost scalded by the touch of her waist. "Nonsense. You're so shameless in broad daylight." Although it was a scolding, her tone was gentle and doting. Her lips were curled into a faint warm smile. How am I shameless? We are a legitimate fiancé. There are many bolder Langjun and his wife in Wanzhou. Why can't I hug you? Changsheng wanted to hang on to him. Feng Yi was the top scorer of this imperial examination, but she was sent to the extremely distant border. How could the conditions there compare to Wanzhou? In other times, this would be the place where the demoted officials would be sent to. Thinking of this, Changsheng was even sadder. She didn't know how Feng Yi would be tempered by the border environment after her 4-year term. Feng Yi smiled. Lord Jiang naturally has her considerations for making such arrangements. Now that the world is settled, the people on this vast land are her people. Didn't she nurture the students of the Golden Scale Academy for so many years, so that we can benefit the people of the world? There's no reason for Wanzhou to be prosperous while the people of other states and counties suffer. Lord Jiang sent us there to let the people of those places live a good life. Changsheng said, You speak a lot of great principles, but you don't know how many people are watching. Feng Yi smiled faintly as she recalled Jiang Fei. She recalled the scene of Jiang Ji summoning batch after batch of scholars. She spoke earnestly of her plans. The more outstanding the students, the more impoverished and suffering they would be sent to for a 4-year term. If they could endure the hardships and benefit the local people, it would not be difficult for them to be promoted in the future, and their official careers would also be smooth. If they didn't want to or had a reason to stay away, they could also find a job nearby, but the position would definitely not be high. After all, the positions in Wanzhou were basically saturated, and there weren't many high-ranking positions in the neighboring prosperous prefectures and counties. Even if there were good positions, it would not be given to newcomers like them who had just entered their official careers. This year's top scholar Lu Zhou took the initiative to choose a remote place. That place was next to Feng Yi, and it was even more barren. Don't you feel wronged? Perhaps it was because she was pregnant, but Lord Jiang was very patient that day. His words were also very gentle. Lu Zhou said, Mr. Jiang has spent a lot of money to cultivate me. You have spent more than 10 years of effort. A drop of water should be returned with a spring of water. If Lord Jiang needs it, this lowly official will go. Moreover, I have been taught by the headmaster of the academy for many years. I am always worried about the people and always look forward to doing my bit for them. Now that he was fortunate enough to help the people at the border, what grievances did he have? This lowly official entered officialdom to assist Lord Jiang and benefit the people. The people in prosperous places do not need an inexperienced newcomer like me to cause trouble, but the people at the border do. This involved a problem of pursuit. If entering officialdom was to pursue fame and fortune, it was naturally best to stay in a prosperous place, where they would suffer less and earn more. At the same time, because they were newcomers, there was little room for them to play, and they would be buried for no reason. If entering officialdom was to benefit the people and share the burden of the king, where would they go if they didn't go to be an official where they were needed? Lu Zhou didn't think Jiang Ji's arrangement was to send them away. Don't doubt it, she was such a brainless fan. Which girl from the female class didn't like Lord Jiang? After Lu Zhou said everything, the expressions of the other people in the same department were a little subtle. Some people were willing to be transferred to other places to shine, while others, after hesitating, wanted to stay closer because of their parents, health, and other reasons. Everyone had their own aspirations, and they couldn't be forced. Jiang Ji also knew how desolate and difficult those places were, so she assigned each of them with guards and a special channel to submit letters. Their letters would be delivered to Jiang as soon as possible. On Ji's desk. Go ahead and do it. As long as it is beneficial to the people and the country, I will support it. Jiang Ji hesitated for a moment, then added a sentence. No matter what kind of stinky power you are facing, remember, the person standing behind you is me. Feng Yi collected his thoughts and smiled. If they want to watch the show, then so be it. How can the sparrows know the ambitions of the great? Changsheng smiled. Yet they are a bunch of sparrows with no vision. No wonder Lord Jiang taught them a lesson over and over again. Feng Yi hesitated for a moment, then hugged her waist and pulled her into his arms. 4 years later, I will come back and marry you, Changsheng said. For years, it just so happens that I have graduated from the academy. Maybe I will look for you first. Time always passed very quickly, and it was time to set out on the road. Changsheng hugged his waist and said angrily, "You are not allowed to flirt when you are an official. Not women, not men." "Yes, it's yours," Fengyi comforted her. "Study hard in the academy, don't neglect your studies." Changsheng said, "Just watch, the next top scholar will be me." Fengyi hugged her for the last time, turned over and got on the horse. He waved the horsewhip and went on the official road. Realizing that Changsheng's gaze was still on him, Fengyi waved the horsewhip hard. The breeze blew his sleeves, leaving the brightest color in the most beautiful age. Similar scenes were happening everywhere. This group of scholars went to a remote place to be an official without a word of complaint. Among them, the majority were students from the Golden Scale Academy. Those who secretly mocked them felt bored and gradually shut their mouths. In many people's eyes, going to a remote place to be an official was demeaning. How many officials in the previous dynasty died on the way to being demoted? These young and vigorous scholars ignored this point and resolutely went on their way, which made many people sigh. If someone paid attention, they would most likely find that these scholars were mostly from humble families. When these scholars return, the gentry will have a headache. Jiang. It was not scary that the important officials around Ji were from humble families. What was scary was that most of the middle and lower levels were from humble families. When the Jiang dynasty was established, the humble families would not be at a disadvantage in the fight between the gentry and the commoners. It would most likely maintain a stable situation. Master Yuanjing was pleased that his students had such a high level of understanding. Of course, this did not exclude Jiang. Ji's words, "The person standing behind you is me," were too passionate. It made these young people's blood boil. The great scholar Wan Xian had aged a lot these years, but his spirit, qi and spirit were more vigorous than before. Chapter 1803. Grass Snake Gray Line, thousands of miles long. It seemed like a bold move, but it actually contained deep meaning and concerns. When she founded the Golden Scale Pavilion and the Golden Scale Academy, she did it under the pressure of the aristocrats. Everyone thought that she only wanted to promote the poor. Although the aristocrats were angry, they did not realize the current situation. Who would have thought that one after another, in the end, everything would be linked to each other, and everyone would be trapped? Of course, this method also required charisma. Jiang? Ji undoubtedly had this quality. If I can see these children bring a different kind of vitality to the world in my lifetime, I will have no regrets in this life. Yuanjing did not teach his students how to pursue fame and fortune. In the end, it was all about one word, people. Benefiting the people, not for their own selfish desires. It was just that it was too difficult to achieve this. People's selfish desires could not be controlled by external forces. What Master Yuanjing could do was to try his best to instill his own ideas in his students and set an example. He had taught for many years and never became an official. It was also because of his unique stubbornness and perseverance. Wan Xian laughed and said, "I still have a long life. These people were all strong. It would not be a problem to work hard for another 20 to 30 years. Would have no regrets in this life." There was only hope when one was alive. Wan Xian fled Zhongzhou in a sorry state. Now half of Zhongzhou was in Jiang. Ji's hands, he could go back in glory. As the midsummer arrived, Ji's popularity was pushed to another peak. Others racked their brains for her, but she lived a comfortable life as a pregnant woman. "TSK, the young master in my belly is more important than me." Wuxia said. "Why do you say so, my lord?" "Of course, my lord is more important than the young master." Ji said. "In the past, when I was lazy, you would dig 3 feet into the ground to find me. Now you are fighting for work. The difference in treatment is so big." Everyone was fighting to work overtime. Ji's slight movement of the bamboo slips would attract countless worried gazes. If she had known that pregnant women would feel so good, she would have given birth to a few when she was free. Wuxia said, "Pregnant women should not work hard. The meaning of the child in my lord's belly is different. They naturally value it more." Those in the know knew that the child was artificial. Those who did not know would think that it was a pregnancy. If the child was accidentally given by Jiang, Ji Lang was gone. Wouldn't everyone be worried about the wrath of heaven? Ginger? Ji said. I don't care. You are treating me differently. She was pregnant, not a cripple. If they didn't allow this or that, did they still have her as their lord in their eyes? Ginger? Ji's zodiac was that of a donkey. Instead of walking when led, he would retreat when beaten. The more Feng Zhen and the others tried to stop her from working, the more she insisted on going. Not only did he have to do a lot of things, but he also had to work overtime. I love work. Work makes me happy. Everyone. He deeply suspected that the Lord was having a fake pregnancy. That's hard to say. Feng Zhen looked at his lord, who was jumping up and down, and then thought about how other pregnant women behaved like porcelain dolls when they were pregnant. He suddenly felt a headache coming on. She was really pregnant. She was worried that her lord would lose the child. What about a fake pregnancy? Not only would he be upset, but the others would also be so angry that they would find noodles to hang themselves. As time passed, Feng Zhen became more and more worried, and the more worried he became, the balder he became. Where did his lord's pregnant belly go? Where did my lord hide her pregnant belly? She was 4 to 5 months pregnant, so she should at least have some small hills, right? Where's the lord? Pig trotters. Complaining was one thing, but Feng Zhen wouldn't voice his worries lest they waver. Because of Jiang? The artificial halo that Ji created for the child was too big. Everyone's eyes were focused on her belly. If there were rumors that the pregnancy was fake, when she gave birth to the child in the future, there would be people among the people who would say that the child wasn't her biological child, but that she had adopted it to cover up her lie. Feng Zhen's worries were obviously unnecessary. With Wuxia sparing no effort to promote the child as a God-sent child, and different from ordinary children, who would blindly compare. If the God-sent child was like an ordinary child, then they would feel that it was unreal. Feng Zhen. Wuxia was shameless. It was fine if it was others, but as the biological father, how could Wuxia not know whether the child was conceived by instinct or artificially made? Jiang. Ji's unprecedented enthusiasm for work erupted. During this period, she also paid close attention to the work of the scholars who were sent abroad. After all, it was a remote and desolate place, a place far away from the emperor. It was hard to guarantee that there weren't any daring people who bullied them. Of course, she also had to pay attention to these scholars to prevent them from losing themselves in an unrestrained place. Fortunately, these young people didn't disappoint her. Their methods were slightly immature, but they were growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Other than that, Ji was still most concerned about the situation in Zhongzhou. Taking down half of the country in just over 20 days was very impressive, but it didn't mean that such a strong momentum could be maintained forever. Guanrang and the others also realized the drawbacks, and had been adopting a steady approach these days. They had to first stand firm and stabilize their foundation before moving forward. Guanrang was the type of person who would go wild when he could, but when he wasn't, he would fight steadily and defend himself like a hedgehog. The feudal lords of Zhongzhou couldn't do anything to him at all. Instead, Guanrang took advantage of them. Among them, the Nye family of Zhongzhou was also on its last legs. Among the few feudal lords that still existed in Zhongzhou, the overall strength of the Nye family could no longer be ranked. Speaking of which, it was quite a pity. Their original master, Nye Qing, had experienced several internal rebellions in the Nye family and disappeared during the last rebellion. Sun Wen and Guanrang were behind these rebellions. With the fall of the Nye family, the feudal lords of Zhongzhou completely lost their backbone. That was why Guanrang and the others had taken advantage of them. However, this wasn't enough. Old Master Sun Wen asked Guanrang, "What are you calculating?" Guanrang replied, "Calculating the hour." Hour? Craning his neck to take a look, Old Master Sun Wen's expression became more subtle. If he wasn't mistaken, Guanrang was calculating the hour of his lord's pregnancy and delivery. What are you trying to do? Old Master Sun Wen was a little confused. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't understand Guanrang's operation. Guanrang said, "Before the young lord is born, I want to take down the other half of Zhongzhou." Having only half of Zhongzhao was inauspicious. Taking down the other half before the child was born would make it a whole. This was a good sign. Sun Wen was speechless. Had Qiguan Rang ever considered the elderly? No, he hadn't. He only considered the lord and the young lord. Even his own father wasn't as dedicated as him. Old Master Sun thought of how Dongqing and Nanxing had all closed down, and only Zhongzhao was still in full swing. He suddenly felt like he had shot himself in the foot. Back then, Feng Zhen and the others had worked themselves to death and fought battles everywhere. They weren't as carefree as he was. Looking back now, he suddenly realized that the arrows in his heart were the flags he had set back then. Qiguan Rang still felt that it wasn't enough. He sent people to Xichang and Beiyuan to investigate. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Chapter 1804. As the months slowly grew longer, Jiang Pingji's health improved. Ji Yunshu's pregnant belly was still not out, but no one dared to slack off. Her status was now on par with Wei Xi's daughter. Ginger? Ji could not help but complain. National treasure panda. I'm now the only humanoid national treasure. I'm not happy at all. As he rubbed the panda girl darling's chin and the white fur on her head, an indescribable loneliness welled up in his heart. Other people had all kinds of pregnancy symptoms, but only she was strange. She really wanted to work, and no one could stop her. If she didn't work, she would feel uncomfortable all over. Every day, he was so energetic that he had nowhere to vent it. When he closed his eyes, he would dream that he was wandering in the sea of work, surrounded by official documents. The more she acted like this, the more everyone guarded against her. They were so scared that even in their dreams, they were afraid. How could she not be worried? Which pregnant woman would react like this? 5 million salted fish's greatest pleasure right now was watching Ginger. Ji was pitting her wits against everyone else for the sake of her job. Digital evolution. If I had the energy of the streamer when I was pregnant, my boss would have been so happy that his teeth would have fallen out. Shan Sheng Shui Fui Buyuo. It's rare to see a pregnant woman like the streamer. Most women have a hard time during pregnancy, and they lack energy. Edema, obesity, gluttony, these were all normal. If anyone was as energetic as the host when they were pregnant, their figure was not deformed, their belly was not swollen, their skin was so good that even a fly could break its leg if it stood on it, and they were also enthusiastic about their work. It was estimated that it would not be so difficult for women to get a job. Nowadays, women who have not given birth to a second child are far less competitive in the workplace than men who have the ability. Apart from these, there were also many experienced mothers who gave advice to Jiang Xiang. Ji Zhizhao told her what she could and couldn't eat. In short, the first child should be raised according to the book, and the second should be raised according to the pig. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's daughter, Nan Nan, who was carrying a bear's brain, was confused. Then was she considered to be the first or second child? During the 6th month of pregnancy, the weather in the north became a little chilly. Ji woke up one day and suddenly lost interest in work. That day, she was dispirited and had no appetite for anything she ate. She looked so dispirited that it was as if she had lost all attachment to the world. Feng Zhen and the others watched with raised eyebrows. They didn't know what ideas their lord had come up with to torment them again. My lord is not going to the government office today? Ginger? Ji Yunshu waved her hand and said, I'm not going. Just looking at those bamboo slips gives me a headache. I don't want to read a single word of it now. The lord's mood was like a child's face, changing at a whim. Without waiting for Feng Zhen and the others to heave a sigh of relief, thinking that their lord was finally willing to focus on nurturing the fetus, she began to stir up trouble again. Zhang Ping of the woodworking workshop was unjustly implicated. He had to bear the merciless criticism from the crowd. In all honesty, he really wasn't the one who seduced his lord to go to the carpentry workshop. He was also innocent. Who knew why his lord came to the carpentry workshop and refused to leave? She also said that the wood shavings from the wood workshop were extremely delicious. Just by smelling the aroma, one could eat more than 20 bowls of rice. It was too fragrant. Feng Zhen's expression changed involuntarily, as if he had seen a ghost. What do you mean by the smell of sawdust smells good? Would a normal person like sawdust and even want to roll into a pile of sawdust to sleep? With his lord's soft skin and tender flesh, wasn't she afraid that the sawdust would stab her all over in pain? I heard that pregnant women have strange temperaments during pregnancy. My lord's behavior isn't out of line, said a colleague whose wife had given birth to 3 children and was very experienced in pregnancy. The most important thing for a pregnant woman is to be in a good mood. Don't go against her wishes. You must go along with her. Fengzhen held it in for a long time, but couldn't say anything. He wanted to retort. He was the father of 2 children, and he had been by his side both times when his wives were pregnant. How could their pregnancies be so normal? However, he thought that this analogy might offend the Lord, so he forced himself to hold it in. The other officials were also silent for a long time. Most of them were in their 30s or 40s and had become fathers long ago. They had at least 2 children and indeed had never encountered such a phenomenon. There was even someone who secretly complained to his close friend. It's not so good to have a female lord. Once she gets pregnant, everyone seems to have become a father for once. Friend versus Ginger? Ji Yunshu was very respectful. When she heard this, her expression changed, and she decided to cut ties with this friend. Friends who are disloyal and disrespectful to the ruler should not be made. The official, who had a strong desire to live, added, Lord Jiang only has this child at such a young age. Everyone is afraid that she will bump into something. Ever since she announced that she was pregnant, she had not had a good night's sleep. The god who bestowed Lin has not moved, but us officials are trembling with fear. His friend said with a dark expression. Even so, you can't say such disrespectful words. If these words were to spread to the ears of outsiders, he was not afraid of being punished. The official said, I have absolutely no disrespect. He was respectful and trembling with fear. Ji Yunshu had been worried since the beginning of her pregnancy. She had to endure the other party's unreasonable pregnancy reaction. Wasn't this like being a father for once? If it was the wife of the family, no matter how uncomfortable she felt in her heart or how uncomfortable she was, she would not torment her husband with such trivial matters. But who was the Lord? If the Lord was in a bad mood, the unlucky ones were the officials. The other party said whatever he had on his mind without any scruples. Therefore, Jiang during the period of Ji Yunshu's pregnancy, the officials felt that being a father was even stronger than their own wives' pregnancies. There were even nosy officials who turned to their wives and complained that the Lord was unpredictable, changed her attitude faster than the weather, and had strange hobbies. Unexpectedly, the wives at home rolled their eyes and told them many pregnancy details that made them flabbergasted. What kind of pregnancy hobbies were fanatical about work and wood shavings? There was a lady who liked to pick her feet after she was pregnant, then put her fingers under her nose and sniffed. If she did not smell it, she would vomit and would not be able to eat. However, for the sake of her personal image, when she did this, she had to send away the maids and old women who served her, leaving only 2 confidants. There was a lady who liked to go to the toilet and squat in the pit after she was pregnant. It was said that the smell in the pit was very pleasant, and her dispirited spirit also improved. That lady's husband. No wonder the lady had been locked in her room after she was pregnant and refused to get close to him. Even when they met, she would put on perfume. Also, the lady liked the feeling of farting and liked to nest under the blanket to do so. There was also a lady who had a special hobby. She liked to rub the body mud from the tailbone, collect it bit by bit, and rub it into a big ball. Everyone, looking at their wives' breaths, elegant and graceful, and then thinking about how they looked when they did this, they just wanted to raise their hands to their foreheads. Was there any way to continue living like this? In comparison, it seemed that their lord was more like a normal pregnant woman. She only loved to work and liked carpentry. She did not take off her shoes and pick her feet to smell it, nor did she squat in the pit to smell feces. She did not love to fart, and she did not rub the mud around her son to collect it. Thinking about it this way, it seemed that having such a lord was quite a blessing. Chapter 1805. Zhang Ping and the rest had experimented and explored repeatedly. With Ji's help, they had already made natural rubber that could be used to make solid tires. It was just that this kind of tire was heavier. Ji had only completed half of the bicycle design previously, and was still figuring out the other half. Jiang. Why did Ji suddenly think of the carpentry workshop? Because she suddenly remembered that she had not taken Wei Ci for a ride. A bicycle was needed for a ride, and Zhang Ping and the rest were inefficient, so they had not sent the finished product to her. As the saying went, do it yourself, and you will have everything you need. Ji came to the carpentry workshop to inspect the progress, and was immersed in it, unable to get out. Thanks to this period of contact, Ji found that the development of the carpentry workshop had entered a certain abnormal state. Ji found that the development of the carpentry workshop had entered a certain abnormal state. They had accumulated enough experience, and their practical and creative abilities were not low, but the gap was very serious. Other than Zhang Ping and the other two and a few talented craftsmen, the others only knew how to copy, and had no idea why they were doing it, let alone improving it. When she asked Zhang Ping, he thought it was a problem of personal talent. The inheritance of the Mahists had always been difficult, and they had always chosen talented disciples. Those without talent who entered this branch of the Mahists would only be ordinary craftsmen with slightly better skills in the end. Jiang. Ji frowned and asked how the Mahists taught their disciples, and this question revealed the crux of the problem. Zhang Ping cautiously asked, Lord, do you feel that something is wrong? Everyone said that pregnant women were temperamental, and their Lord was in control of life and death. She could kill when she was angry. Jiang. Ji said, I know what the problem is. Has Shihing paid attention to the mathematics courses of the students of the Golden Scale Academy? Zhang Ping said, I've vaguely heard about it. Jiang. Ji communicated with Zhang Ping seriously. I'll say something you don't like to hear. The Mahist theory itself is not suitable for the complicated court, but this does not mean that the Mahists are less useful than the Confucians and the legalists. On the contrary, in the way of the people's livelihood, it has a role that the Confucians and the legalists cannot compare. Whether it is the Confucians, the legalists or the Mahists, descendants are the foundation of inheritance. Without descendants, no matter how amazing the knowledge is, there will be no one to inherit and pass it on. I don't think that the Mahists have high requirements for descendants. I feel that the Mahists have taken a detour on this path, or should I say the wrong path. I've been observing the carpentry workshop for the past few days, and found that many people know what to do according to the blueprints. Their craftsmanship is superb, but when the parts are slightly adjusted, they will mess up. There were many similarities between the manufacturing methods of many things. If he could summarize these similarities, wouldn't he be able to avoid many detours? Can you simplify everything? After listening, Zhang Ping pondered for a long time. He seemed to have grasped something, but he could not grasp the gist of it. He could only ask Jiang for help. Your subject is ignorant. Please clarify further, my lord. Ginger? Ji said, for example, in the computational classic of Zhou, Shanggao said, fold the rules, hook the 3, cultivate the 4 and the 5. The 9 chapters of arithmetic says, multiply the Pythagorean, and divide it, that is the chord. Between them, other than this example, are there other constant and unchanging rules? I feel that if we can decipher these, or rather, summarize them, the future generations will be able to avoid many detours. Now, the most important thing for the carpentry workshop is not to invent many siege weapons or defense weapons. The world is about to be settled. Their role will also change from attacking the enemy to deterring those thieves in the surrounding countries, so that foreign enemies will not dare to invade the people. However, this does not mean that the carpentry workshop has lost its purpose. It can only turn to research things that are beneficial to the people. I hope that it can continue to develop and go further. I even want to add this knowledge to the textbooks of the Golden Scale Academy, so that they can learn it. Experience can only be understood and not explained, but knowledge is different. It is better to memorize than to know nothing. After listening, Zhang Ping was silent for a long time. Occasionally, confusion flashed across his eyes. As for the research on the laws, Ginger? Ji originally wanted Zhang Ping and the others to let nature take its course, but she did not expect them to reach a dead end. So, she naturally had to help them. Ginger? Ji could only say so much. How much Zhang Ping and the others could comprehend would depend on their own luck. After that, Zhang Ping and Ginger continued to make her bicycle. Ji continued to make her bicycle. The other parts were easy to make, but the most difficult part was the chain. She didn't know what an old-fashioned bicycle looked like, so she listened to the idle spectators and drew a lot of circles. This was also the main reason why Zhang Ping had not finished the bicycle for several months. What was he supposed to do with those messy circles? I wonder if it's Ginger? Ji's resentment was too deep. When she was 8 months old, she found out that the European king of 1,000 years was actually a technical worker at a closed bicycle factory. Coincidentally, the identity of the transmigrator was from the carpentry workshop. When he transmigrated, he was in Jiangxiang. In front of Ji, they looked at each other in dismay. The atmosphere was as silent as honey. I want a bicycle. When a streamer that they had been following for more than 10 years made a request to you, which salted fish could refuse. Not to mention that this salted fish had been unemployed for more than 2 months. Just as he was worrying about how he was going to make a living, he became the lucky king who was chosen. If he did it well, he would immediately become an internet celebrity. Create. The European king nodded vigorously. He was not a man if he did not build a bicycle. However, the lucky king looked at Jiang. Ji Yinshu's stomach started to tremble. She felt that she couldn't put her hand anywhere. Before the 7th month of pregnancy, Jiang Guoxiang was pregnant. Ji Yinshu's stomach had always been excessively flat. It was even slimmer than an A4 waist and had beautiful abs. 7 months later, her stomach was like a balloon that slowly swelled up. It was a different shape every day. Now that it had been more than 8 months, she finally felt like a pregnant woman about to give birth. The crux of the matter was that they were twins. It was very difficult to carry them to full term. Typically, they would give birth after just 9 months. The lucky king was a little hesitant. If he helped the tyrant build the bicycle, would this big shot ride it with a big belly? In the end, his strong desire to live won over his worry. With his participation, the bicycle went through a series of changes and finally made its grand debut half a month later. Zhang Ping looked at what was said to be a bicycle and was at a loss as to how to use it. It was used as a cart, and it was not stable. After all, it had 2 wheels and not 3 wheels. If he didn't support it, it would fall to the ground. Jiang. Ji Yinshu was excited. I'll teach you how to drive this thing. Salted fish. Zhang Ping. The helping tyrant lucky king. The nightmare had come true. Tudafeichio. If I remember correctly, the streamer doesn't know how to ride a bicycle. Jiang. In Ji Yinshu's era, technology was too advanced. How could there be bicycles? Everyone's shared transportation was a maglev car, alright? Jiang? It was true that Ji didn't know how to ride a bicycle, but she had long legs. Even if she didn't know how to ride, she wouldn't fall. Her sense of balance could be slowly found. As one of the best fighters in the Federation, how could she not even be able to handle a bicycle? But just as she held the handle, her stomach began to ache. The feeling grew stronger and stronger. Jiang? Ji. Could this be the old chief's desire to live? Zhang Ping asked carefully, Lord, what's wrong? Jiang. Ji held her stomach with one hand and looked calm. However, what she said made Zhang Ping unable to calm down. Chapter 1806. Go to the delivery room? Why? Zhang Ping was puzzled at first, but he soon froze on the spot. His eyes glanced down stiffly and landed on Jiang Pingji's belly. My lord, are you going to start? Zhang Ping stammered. Only his brain could still move. The rest of his limbs had stopped working. He had forgotten how to use them. Jiang Pingji stroked her belly that seemed to be falling. She frowned and thought for a while. She said uncertainly, should be? What do you mean should be? Zhang Ping was stunned. How could he respond to what his lord had said? Jiang Pingji frowned and said confidently, It's my first time giving birth too. How do I know if this feeling has started? Haven't you been a father for a while? Why don't you have this common sense? Why are you asking me? Hold the bicycle first. I'll take a breather. Zhang Ping took the bicycle in a daze. He had indeed been a father before, but the child did not crawl out of his belly. He knew what was going on. but he had not experienced it firsthand. Fortunately, Zhang Ping was still reliable. After a second, he immediately pushed the bicycle to the maid beside him and hurriedly called for help. I say, slow down. The child has not been born yet. If you push me too fast, it might fall out halfway. Jiang Pingji did not forget to say some flirtatious words at this time. Her ability to endure pain was unimaginable by ordinary people, so she felt fine at the moment. The others were anxious. Zhang Ping wanted to carry her to the delivery room and hand her over to the midwife. In the end, Zhang Ping did not have the strength to fly. He did not dare to touch Jiang Pingji. He could only bear with his anger and stare at her. She was pregnant with twins. The doctor said that twins were usually born at the end of August or the beginning of September. It was rare for them to survive to full term. In other words, Jiang Pingji, who was in her early 9th month of pregnancy, could give birth at any time. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready at any time. Jiang Pingji's range of activities was also limited to not far from the delivery room. It was very convenient to go there. Zhang Ping looked at his lord, who was said to be giving birth, walking steadily to the delivery room with cold sweat. He had the illusion that his worldview had been refreshed. Just send it here. Wait for news. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath to relieve the discomfort in her stomach. She waved her hand with her back to Zhang Ping and entered the delivery room with the help of the maid, Zhang Ping. The others also received the news one after another. Except for a few who really couldn't leave their posts, the group of important ministers all arrived. Except for Wuxia. Of course, everyone's attention was on Jiang Pingji. How could they notice that Wuxia was missing? When will the baby be born? Zhang Ping said. It hasn't even been 5 minutes since the Lord went in. No matter how fast he is, he'll have to wait for a few hours, right? The official was shocked when he heard that. How many hours? Why is it taking so long? Zhang Ping. What kind of tone was that? It was as if his wife could go in and take a dump and come out. Was giving birth that simple? It was considered fast for the first time to give birth within a few hours. Some women with narrow birth tracts and difficulties in giving birth would need to give birth for a day or two. The next official hurried over, and the first thing he asked was, is the young master a man or a woman? Zhang Ping said. It hasn't even been 10 minutes since the Lord went in. It hasn't even started yet. How would she know if it's a man or a woman? The official was stunned. It's only been the time to brew a cup of tea? Why does it feel like half a day has passed? Zhang Ping. Feng Zhen came over at that moment. Zhang Ping didn't wait for him to speak before saying, the Lord went in for 10 minutes and hasn't started yet. We don't know if the young master is a man or a woman. If everything goes smoothly, we can see the young master in a few hours. If not, we might have to wait for a day. Feng Zhen gave him a baffled look, as if to say, aren't you spouting nonsense? Zhang Ping. He couldn't be angry. Today was his Lord's day. Being angry would ruin her luck. Slowly, more than 30 people gathered in the main hall outside the delivery room. Everyone had different expressions, but no one took the initiative to speak. They waited and waited. After another 10 minutes, someone said in a low voice, why isn't there any movement? As the standard men in the feudal era, their children would wait for the harvest after sowing. Some of the better ones would spend the pregnancy with their wives. Some of the worse ones would just leave the work to them and only care about their children. Even when their wives gave birth, they would wait in the study. Therefore, they only knew that pregnant women would scream in pain during childbirth, but they didn't know the details. They thought that all women went through the same process during childbirth. Maybe it hasn't started yet? Feng Zhen also said, maybe it's to save energy. Tiansu and Lu Zheng sat in the corner. Occasionally, they would look in the direction of the delivery room. Their expressions were similar, but their thoughts were different. He held the blessing of peace in his palm and muttered in a low voice, I hope the birth goes smoothly and there are no twists and turns. He meant what he said. Jiang Pingji treated Yang Tao and his former subordinates very leniently. If it were another lord, things would be different. The best outcome would be the safety of the mother and child. The worst outcome would be the death of the child. Those with ulterior motives could take the opportunity to spread rumors that Jiang Pingji was not the chosen one by God. and that she had cursed Ziwei Star. The worst outcome would be the safety of the child, and the mother dying in childbirth. It would be convenient for those with ulterior motives to seize power. The worst outcome would be the death of both mother and child. In that case, such a situation would probably not happen. Those people were ruthless, but they wouldn't want to see the world that had just been stabilized return to war. Lu Zheng said, "It will go smoothly and be safe for all three of us." Tiansu turned to look at him. Lu Zheng was a surrendered official, and kept a low profile. She didn't expect him to appear here today. There won't be any accidents. Lu Zheng was certain. Tiansu said, "I hope so." Although she said that, Tiansu was not confident. It was too dangerous for a woman to give birth. Even if there were no external forces plotting against her, it was easy to have a dystocia and hemorrhage. Everyone outside was panicking, but the atmosphere in the delivery room was quite harmonious. The midwives that were originally prepared were not put to use. Or it could be said that Jiang Pingji had someone she trusted more. The midwives became decorations. She entered the delivery room and turned off the livestream. It was said that Weibo had long been prepared and borrowed external servers from a big company. They hoped that Weibo could withstand the wave of traffic attacks. Thinking of that situation, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but laugh again. The servant who was supporting her said, "I've served so many ladies giving birth, but this is the first time I've seen someone enter the delivery room with a smile. Lord Jiang is in good health and will give birth to Lin or smoothly. Thank you for your auspicious words." Jiang Pingji's face was very pale, but her smile was still considered relaxed. The production tools of this era were very backward. Women gave birth while lying on the bed or squatting on the ground. The latter was easier to exert force than the former, but only peasant women would do that. Women were in severe pain during childbirth. It was really cruel to make them squat to give birth without relieving their pain. Jiang Pingji had no experience in childbirth, but the salted fish in the 5 million streaming room was not incompetent. Through teaching, she made a delivery bed that could be used for sitting and lying. The design of the delivery bed was convenient to exert force, but the people of this era felt ashamed when they saw it. They didn't understand its use. The midwife looked at it and felt puzzled. Jiang Pingji said, "Go to the side and wait." The midwife. Genius remembered the website address in a second. Mobile version. Chapter 1807. Soon, the midwife understood that she was just a decoration. A man who should never have appeared in the delivery room. Get them to cover their eyes. Don't look at things they shouldn't see. Jiang Pingji's tone was very calm. One could not tell that she was a pregnant woman who was about to give birth. Wuxia said, "Leave it to me, my lord." The delivery room was cleaned up. Irrelevant people were herded to the cubicle to wait, including the midwife and the doctor. Only the maidservants who were in charge of boiling water could wait outside. They were all watched by special people. Some had ulterior motives and were extremely afraid. Some were baffled but did not dare to object. This doesn't look like the grandeur that Lord Jiang should have when giving birth. Jiang Pingji was still in the mood to joke at this moment. Wuxia said, "Giving birth doesn't require so many people to move around. Not only is it easy to cause trouble, but it will also give people with ulterior motives an opportunity to take advantage of." Even with experience, Wuxia was so nervous that his hands were trembling. Many imperial concubines, princes, and princesses were killed in this way in the unofficial history of the palace without anyone knowing. Jiang Pingji was really in pain at this moment. She lay on the delivery bed and looked at her slightly shameful posture of waiting to give birth. She smiled and said to Wuxia, "I heard that there used to be a man who accidentally saw his wife giving birth. Since then, he has been dispirited and has no interest in treating his wife." Wuxia said, "I've seen it twice. Have you seen me in such a situation before?" Jiang Pingji was shocked by the bold and unrestrained Wuxia that day. If it were you on a normal day, you would most likely be so embarrassed that you wouldn't be able to speak. Wuxia sighed and said, "My lord is about to give birth. I have to accept whatever you say and make you happy. This is my duty." A woman's positive emotions were conducive to giving birth. If she was seriously frightened, it might even cause the position of the fetus to be reversed, from a natural birth position to a difficult birth position. Wuxia could not afford to take the risk. If this could make the Lord feel more relaxed, why not let her tease him a little? Why are you touching my stomach? After her pregnant belly appeared, she was particularly ticklish. Wuxia's warm fingers touched her stomach, making her want to laugh. Touch the position of the fetus. If it's not in the right position, turn it over before the fetus enters the basin. There's such a method? Wuxia said. I specially found someone to learn it. I disguised myself and followed them to a few places and learned a thing or two. Jiang Pingji laughed. Are you going to dress up as a girl? Wuxia answered patiently. If I was dressed as a man, they wouldn't have let me in. I'm afraid I would have been beaten out by the host. Cross-dressing. Wuxia? He actually didn't get beaten out? Jiang Pingji scrutinized Wuxia's serious face. She was not surprised. His appearance was exquisite and beautiful. He didn't have the cold and hard edges of a man, but he wasn't as feminine as a woman either. After dressing up a little, applying some makeup and changing into a more voluminous female outfit, one would indeed look like an iconic beauty at first glance. Although they are twins, the positions of the fetuses are very good. After the examination, Wuxia heaved a sigh of relief. The probability of a natural birth of twins was not high. Most of the time, one would die prematurely. Did you experience dystocia because the fetus was in an irregular position? Wuxia said. Her Majesty's body was suffering from a chronic illness. She was entangled with worldly affairs and did not take good care of the fetus. She met with trouble during childbirth. In the end, both mother and daughter were safe. When a woman gave birth, outsiders could not help much. Don't be fooled by the scenes of people giving birth in the TV series. The midwives worked very hard, and the maids fetching hot water ran back and forth. If you really went to a modern delivery room to take a look, you would realize that when the delivery room was busy, one midwife had to look after several beds of pregnant women. According to the TV series, the nurses and doctors would be too busy even if they had 3 heads and 6 arms. Wait until the uterus is almost opened before exerting force. My lord can save up some strength now. Wuxia used a handkerchief to wipe away the beads of sweat that rolled down her forehead, and almost wet her eyelashes so that she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Then talk to me for a while. Jiang Pingji's ability to endure pain was extremely high, but this body was not original after all. No matter how much pain she could endure, there was an upper limit. What does my lord want to talk about? Jiang Pingji said. Anything is fine. I'm really in pain now. Talk and be distracted. Her pain was really painful. It was not the pain that she used to say when she was acting coquettishly or teasing Wuxia. However, Wuxia could only watch and was unable to share her burden. Jiang Pingji forced a somewhat stiff smile. I want to hear how you like me. The two of them did not make much noise when they spoke. Those who were a distance away could not hear what they said, let alone the people waiting outside the delivery room. Feng Jin and the others waited for more than 2 hours. This was probably the longest they had ever waited for more than 2 hours. Afterwards, when some people recalled it, they could not help but complain that even their wives did not wait for so long when they gave birth. At that moment, no one had the mood to laugh at themselves. There was no movement in the delivery room. Their hearts could only be raised high, with nowhere to rest. Some people could not help but imagine situations such as a hemorrhage and dystocia. The more they thought about it, the more afraid they became. The more they were afraid, the more they could not get rid of the images in their minds. The real situation was very different from what they imagined. Jiang Pingji's delivery was very smooth. Because of her special body, her belly did not really show until 7 months. She did not have too much nutrition during her pregnancy, so the size of the fetus was not big. When Wuxia said that he could see the baby's head, her body was a little numb from the pain, but she still did as she was told. At that moment, Wuxia was calm. He steadily helped the baby out of the birth canal with both hands. His actions were agile. Jiang Pingji felt her belly loosen up a little. She asked while sweating profusely, "Is it a boy or a girl?" "It's a girl. It's a girl." Even though Jiang Pingji already knew the answer, she felt that there was a different meaning in asking after going through the procedure. The eldest daughter was small, but her voice was very loud. Her voice could be heard in the main hall outside the delivery room. She cried pitifully. Jiang Pingji. No matter how Wei Xi coaxed her, she did not stop crying. Jiang Pingji waved her hands weakly and said, "Let her cry for a while. She's been wronged." Wei Xi. Jiang Pingji could not tell Wei Xi that her daughter had been kicked into the basin to give birth. Don't think that she could not see the situation in her belly with her mental strength. Pei Qian, what's wrong with you kicking my daughter? Look at this child crying. The second child was born in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Her crying was a little weak, and her voice was childish. She pulled the daughter's leg and fixed her eyes on her. She's also a girl. Wei Xi panicked at first, but after taking a closer look at the appearance of the two children, he breathed a sigh of relief. They were not quite the same. That was safe. Jiang Pingji could not help but roll her eyes. Fraternal twins were not identical. Wasn't it normal for them to look different? Unbeknownst to her, Wei Xi had worried about these two children for a long time. There was a period of time when he dreamed of two identical children standing in front of him. They kept asking him to distinguish who was the eldest and who was the second. If he guessed wrongly, they would have to leave. Have you named them? Wei Xi said, "There are a few. Do you want to continue using the name Jiang Yan?" "Don't. Otherwise it's unfair to both of them." Jiang Pingji was silent for a while. "Linling, one Jianglin, one Jianglang?" Wei Xi. "Is the Lord sure you want to trick your youngest daughter like this? The character Lang has a good meaning, but do you still remember your surname, my lord? Jianglang, Jianglang. Jianglang has run out of ideas? Why don't we each name one?" Chapter 1808. Most of the words beside the word you had good connotations. They could be chosen as names, but they could not be named so casually. They had to go through the process. Jiang Pingji asked, "Must it be you?" Wei Xi did not know why it had to be you. Jiang Yan's name was chosen by drawing lots. Wei Tsong came with his sister. The third and fourth children should follow this naming custom. Otherwise, it would seem a little unconventional. Even people with obsessive-compulsive disorder could not stand it. Jiang Pingji said, "Since there is no convention, let's change it." Wei Xi's brows twitched. He had a bad feeling. For example, what about Jiangzhua? When Wei Xi heard the word, he could not think of which zhua it was. Jiang Pingji continued, "The word zhua is a blessing. It has the meaning of protection, and also the meaning of the throne." Wei Xi was almost shocked. The child was born less than an hour ago, but he was given the zhua of the zhua. He was worried that if the blessing was too great, it would harm the child. Jiang Pingji did not care about Wei Xi's worries. She felt that the word zhua was as arrogant as the halo on her daughter's head. The name Jiangzhua doesn't sound good. Wei Xi thought for a while and suggested, "How about Lian?" "Lian," Wei Xi said. "Lian is a vessel used to hold food during sacrifices in ancient times. It also has the intention of inheriting the ancestral weapon. She is regarded as the heir." Compared to being careless and arrogant, holding up the child to tell the world that she was the heir to the throne, it was better to be more subtle. Whether it was Jiang Lian or Wei Xi, he hoped that she would be steady, honest, and broad-minded. Not only would she inherit the ancestral weapon, but she would also be responsible for the national weapon. Jiang Pingji pondered for a long time. In the end, she had no choice but to choose Lian as the child's name. Although she also had the intention of treating her as the heir, she expressed it in a more tactful way. It was somewhat vague. The third child's name was decided. As for the fourth child's name, to be honest, Jiang Pingji did not want to waste her brain cells. In the end, she simply used a shortcut. Call her Jiang Yan. When Wei Xi heard the name, he was stunned. Didn't the Lord say that you don't need yen? The beauty on the jade wall is called yen. What I'm talking about is the stone is like jade. When Wei Xi heard this, he frowned. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that his lord did not like younger daughters. A stone that resembled jade was, in the end, a stone and not a beautiful jade. It only had the appearance, but no substance. Wei Xi was not satisfied, and he clearly expressed his dissatisfaction. Jiang Pingji did not know how to explain to Wei Xi that he only had 3 children in his 2 lives, and that his youngest daughter was an impostor. She looked down at the baby girl in her arms. The little girl's eyes were closed, and her breathing was steady and slow. She was extremely obedient. That's Jiang Yan, the Yan who is known as Yan because of her beauty. Jiang Pingji looked like she was going to argue with him. Wei Xi thought about it and nodded in agreement. To him, his eldest daughter was also Jiang Yan, and his youngest daughter was also Jiang Yan. Having the same name did not mean that they were the same person. Wei Xi would not mix them up. But he couldn't let his youngest daughter carry the name Bai, especially with his eldest daughter Lian as a foil. Who knew what those despicable people would say? Two twin children, one in front of the other in the time it took to drink a cup of tea, but their futures were as different as heaven and earth. Not only their futures, but even their names made it clear that the two were different. It really hurt his youngest daughter's heart. Wei Xi did not want his youngest daughter to get hurt, nor did he want the relationship between his lord and the little prince to drift apart because of this. Little did he know, relationship between mother and daughter? It was impossible. It was impossible in this lifetime. Jiang Pingji was worried that when he grew up, he would beat her until he called her daddy. Therefore, she wanted to take advantage of him _smiley face, angle, _ when his wings hardened. Jiang Pingji's health was very good. Even though she had gone through a labor, she could now pack up and carry the child out. Since the child's first cry, everyone had been waiting anxiously for the young lord to come out. In the end, after waiting and waiting, there was still no movement from the delivery room. It couldn't be. Could something have happened to the lord? Feng Zhen and the others' hearts suddenly jumped to their throats. They wanted to send someone to inquire, but it was impossible. Finally, they saw their lord, who looked tired but still in good spirits, come out with two children in each of her arms. Everyone. In their impression, women were so weak after giving birth that they couldn't move, but their lord could still carry two children out at the same time. What a godly person. Despite their complaints, everyone still bowed down and congratulated her in unison. Congratulations, my lord, on the birth of Lin Er. Jiang Pingji said. The eldest daughter is Jiang Lian, and the second daughter is Jiang Yan. Twins. Hearing that the two children were of the same gender, a few observant officials frowned. Children who looked the same were not suitable to be the heir, unless one was gone or they had another child. Jiang Pingji did not have time to care about what they were thinking. She let the children's wet nurses carry them and sat on the mats on each side, accepting everyone's greetings. Not far away, the people in the front row could clearly see the children's faces. Upon closer inspection, they did not look alike. Seeing this, they breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, no one asked for a snub and suggested that Jiang Pingji give birth to a boy to inherit the throne. Why? The halo on Princess Lian's head was too dazzling. She was Ziwei, a gift from the heavens. Who could defeat the incarnation of Ziwei the Great who came to the world? Of course, there were also people who hoped that the male heir would inherit the throne, but they did not dare to say it out loud for fear of incurring the wrath of the heavens. For now they would take things one step at a time. If Princess Lian and Princess Yan were not qualified enough to inherit the throne, they would persuade the Lord to give birth to another child in the future. They could not hand over the throne to a mediocre heir, and the heir was a woman. The storm passed like this for the time being. Jiang Pingji also began to be pressured into confinement. Confinement isn't scientific at all. My body is very healthy. Do you believe that I can overturn 10 Fu Wangs? She had to lie in bed for a month without washing her hair or bathing. She could only wipe herself with hot water. It was unbearable. Wei Xi advised her to bear with it, so that she would not suffer from confinement sickness. If she was really bored, she could play with the children. The twins were much smaller than the single babies. They lay in the swaddling clothes like a small ball. Their skin was bright red, and their facial features were wrinkled. They looked like little monkeys that had been shaved. However, Jiang Pingji did not say this metaphor out loud. Otherwise, Wei Xi would nag at her about how inauspicious it was. They're so ugly. What's so fun about them? How are they going to meet people in the future? Jiang Pingji did not hide her disdain. Oh, it was only limited to the younger daughter. The older daughter was definitely cute. The servant with a clean identity said, Don't worry, Lord Jiang. The two princes are very handsome. You can see it when they're 1 month old. Children changed every day. After a while, they would be cute and beautiful. It doesn't matter if they're ugly. They can't get married anyway. Just kidnap whoever you like. The clothes that the two children wore, the diapers that they used, the milk bottles and milk powder that they drank from, were all prepared by the old chief. She was probably the only person in the world who would buy such things for herself. How does it feel to be a baby? She used her fingertips to scratch the sole of the younger daughter's foot. The other party lazily opened her eyes and moved them away slowly. I heard that babies can only see a few dozen centimeters. How did you know I was in this direction? The younger daughter used her fist to fend off Jiang Pingji's harassment. She couldn't hear if she couldn't see clearly. She wasn't deaf. After a while, a hand stroked her butt. Because of this action, the sticky and uncomfortable but became even more uncomfortable. It's a little smelly. The diaper seems to be full. Do you want me to help you change it? The old chief was speechless. Chapter 1809. She couldn't fast forward. She could never fast forward. She could only tease the old chief now so that she wouldn't suffer losses in the future. Jiang Pingji was on the verge of being beaten to death. Her routine was to play with her daughter in the morning, work in the afternoon, and sleep at night. The poor baby's sleeping schedule was different from Jiang Pingji's. When the latter was energetic, they slept soundly. The eldest, Jiang Lian, only knew how to eat, drink, and sleep. She wouldn't cry when she was bullied. She just pouted and had a quiet personality. The second child was different. Jiang Pingji could still play with her at first, but she would resist later. For example, Jiang Pingji would play with her like a hooligan. When her face got close, she would kick her nose. Jiang Pingji slyly said, "Ouch, is the milk powder not weak enough? You don't have much strength in your kick. Are you tickling me?" The second child looked at Jiang Pingji faintly, like the gaze of the Grim Reaper. Since the birth of the twins, Jiang Pingji's status in the streaming room had plummeted. She was the big pig trotter Jiang in their mouth, while the two little kids were Princess Lian and Princess Yan. The second child also became the new queen's meme pack because of her and Jiang Pingji's intimidating gaze. Tutu Feiqiu. My Princess Yan's gaze is too sharp. This is the aura of a queen. She doesn't need a big gold chain, sunglasses, and cigars to exude a strong aura that belongs to a big boss. Princess Lian is a fairy-like soft girl. She's so cute and I want to hug her. Sans Hisongshu snacking. Looking at the two princes, I want to have babies every day. But thinking that the princes are someone else's fairy baby, I'm not so tempted. If I want to have such a high-quality baby, I have to find a male god of the same quality as Beauty Ci. Liangping Pusey snacking. The person above is also narcissistic. Do you think you can compete with Big Pig Trotter Jiang? To have a cute and smart baby like the princes, you must first be comparable to Big Pig Trotter Jiang. The man must be a male god of the same level as Wei Ci. Lanya Moshu Kaiwe. Speaking of this, a few days ago, I saw a birthing video. It shamelessly violated the prince's portrait rights and used them as the video material. I was so angry that I made a report, and continued to make a report. Wan Shenji. I'm already imagining the gentle and soft Princess Lian, and the big boss Princess Yan in a decade or so. How powerful. Looking at the bullet screen, Jiang Pingji could not help but be speechless and choke as the salted fish unanimously categorized their boss, Jiang Lian, as a soft girl. Did they misunderstand the education of old Jiang's family? Soft girl? Impossible. No matter how soft she looked on the outside, she was still black and white on the inside. How could she be a soft girl? Moreover, with the old chief as a younger sister, Jiang Pingji was worried that her eldest daughter would be too domineering in the future. As it turned out, Jiang Pingji's worries were not unfounded. The two children were twins. In the eyes of outsiders, their bodies were not as strong as single babies. Therefore, the third bath was not a big event. It was just a small gesture. After a month of growth, the two children had become as cute and delightful as white jade. Of course, the full moon banquet had to be grand. At the same time, this was also the first time the two children officially met the world. Fengzhen and the others looked at the different but equally cute and healthy princes. Their hearts melted. Someone said that when Princess Lian was born, her cries were as loud as thunder. He knew she was extraordinary when he heard it. Now that he saw her, she was indeed full of nobility. Jiang Lian was the eldest daughter. She also had a meaningful name like Lian. Everyone knew Jiang Pingji's attitude. In comparison, the second daughter, Jiang Yan, received much less attention. She did not like to hear such things. One after another, they flattered her incessantly. It was only because the eldest was not sensible. If she knew, she would be half dead from all the flattery. Unruly people. Who touched my milk bottle? The old chief's eyes suddenly became sharp. He held the milk bottle with one hand and held it with both hands. His gaze was like a knife. Fengzhen retracted his hand in embarrassment. He was just curious about the transparent bottle and what was inside. The bottle was filled with a milky white liquid. It did not smell fishy like a wet nurse's. Instead, it was sweet and had a nice smell. Seeing Princess Yan's small mouth nibble on the bottle, Fengzhen could not restrain his curiosity. He wanted to know what milk it was, so he stretched out his sinful claws. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention. He quickly pulled out the old chief's milk bottle, squeezed some into his wine cup, and returned the bottle to its owner. Fengzhen thought he had done it without anyone noticing. He did not know that the owner of the milk bottle's eyes had become extremely dangerous. Fengzhen tasted it and said, "It's not as sweet as I imagined, but it is indeed very fragrant." The old chief was speechless. A bastard who stole a baby's food for a month. Jiang Pingji only had this many people under her command? As he thought about it, the old chief's drinking speed increased. Who knew how long this one-month banquet would take? If Fengzhen stole her milk again, wouldn't Jiang Pingji laugh at her? Ridicule her for being a good-for-nothing who could not even protect her own food? She drank too enthusiastically and neglected the difference between a baby's body and an adult's. Not long after, she felt a familiar feeling of fullness in her stomach. She was full. She threw the milk bottle aside and reached out to Fengzhen for a hug. Unruly people, help me burp. Fengzhen was also a man who had 2 sons. He knew that babies needed to burp when they were full, so he did not refuse. Thank you for your love, Your Highness. When the old chief patted his face, Fengzhen thought that the child was trying to get close to him. The old chief was speechless. No, I just want to hit you, you shameless old man, who stole my food. The old chief was deeply aware of how inconvenient a baby's body was. It didn't take long for him to feel sleepy. Perhaps it was because they were twins. The 2 children did everything in sync. One was sleepy, and the other was almost as sleepy. However, the old chief still did not fall asleep, because she was awakened by a commotion. It happened a few minutes ago. Although the main characters of the one-month banquet were the 2 young princes, the people eating, drinking, and laughing were the adults. The young prince was sleepy and wanted to go to sleep. As adults, they continued to drink and have fun, pushing the atmosphere of the banquet to the highest point. At that moment, a sudden rush of footsteps came from outside. A messenger with a black panda flag on his back ran out of the hall unimpeded. In the process, he even stumbled and fell. In order to ensure the speed of communication, the messenger who delivered important information would have a conspicuous flag on his back. The color of the flag was the same as the grade of the military report. The black color was an important urgent letter. Anyone who saw the symbol and tried to stop him would be killed without mercy. That was why the messenger was able to arrive outside the palace unimpeded. He did not wait for his breath to catch his breath. He took out an urgent letter with a black panda seal on it. Report, there is an urgent report from the front line. Please read it, my lord. Information? At this time, everyone was worried after hearing this. An urgent report with a black seal was either good news or bad news. The former was good news, while the latter was a bad omen. They had not heard of any changes at the front line recently. Why would they choose a full moon day to send an urgent report 800 miles away? Could it be that someone was taking advantage of this day to secretly attack the Lord? Everyone had different thoughts. Only Jiang Pingji was calm. Good news and bad news. It was such a good day, yet he brought bad luck to her. She wanted to flip over the 18 generations of her ancestors' graves. Chapter 1810. Bring it here. If it was a blessing, it wasn't a curse. If it was a curse, it couldn't be avoided. Even if it was bad news, Jiang Pingji did not intend to hide it. What auspicious omens or ominous omens? It was just a matter of her mouth. Even if it was an ominous sign, she could still lead her troops to kill the person who created the ominous sign and caused her trouble. The hall that was bustling with people toasting and exchanging toasts was now completely silent. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop on the floor. Jiang Pingji tore open the battle report and read it quickly. Her expression did not change at all, and the people below could not guess whether it was good news or bad news. It would be fine if it was good news, but if it was bad news, many people would be implicated. Not only will Her Highness's identity be questioned by the world, but those who fail to do their job will also be held accountable. If it's a light punishment, one person will lose his life, and if it's a heavy punishment, his entire family will have to pay. At that moment, the important ministers who were still outside were almost all veterans who had accompanied Jiang Pingji all the way. It was inappropriate to attack any of them. However, it was even more inappropriate to not make a move, as it would not be able to appease the people outside. If the crisis of public opinion was not handled well, the prestige that Jiang Pingji had painstakingly built up over the years would collapse. I don't know what happened. They thought of all the possible scenarios. For example, the Nanxing aristocrats rebelling. For example, the citizens of the northern borderline were unwilling to be integrated. For example, Qiguan Rang, who had previously been in the limelight, had failed to lead his troops. Half of Zhongzhao's territory, which he had spent a great deal of manpower to conquer, was gone. A few people in the banquet revealed faint sneers. Qiguan Rang's identity was the most controversial among Jiang Pingji's subordinates. Yang Si, the son of a prostitute, had a pure bloodline, but Qiguan Rang was a bastard with mixed blood. How many people were gnashing their teeth in jealousy for a bastard of humble birth to climb so high? Just the thought of serving in the same court as this kind of eccentric and sinister person made them somewhat unhappy. He had thought that Qiguan Rang would fall from grace, but he had almost become a god in one fell swoop. He had conquered half of the country in just over 20 days. Even if it was not all his credit, he had participated in it, and was one of the main planners who had planned everything. The light that fell on him was not weak. Of course, there were people who were jealous, and there were also people who were worried that Qiguan Rang would promote a large number of people from the northern borderline in the future to compete with them. In just a few breaths of time, countless thoughts flashed through their minds. They thought of all kinds of possibilities, but they couldn't guess the truth. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath and slowly put down the urgent report in her hand. She glanced at the people in the hall. Those who were swept by her gaze subconsciously sat up straight. They were afraid that they would become Jiang Pingji's punching bag if they behaved inappropriately. After a long while, a silence that was as long as death by 1,000 cuts, Jiang Pingji slowly opened her mouth. Everyone, I have something to tell you. When everyone heard this, they knew that the real show was about to begin. Continue to recuperate next year. Everyone. They were all prepared to welcome the storm. Did the Lord build up the atmosphere for so long just to say this? Continue to recuperate next year? Zhongzhao was not fighting anymore. Wenzheng offers the other half of Zhongzhao to congratulate the young lord on his birthday. Those who have surrendered, and those who refuse to surrender will be escorted by heavy troops. They will arrive in Wanzhou in at most 7 days. Jiang Pingji held up the battle report from the front line. Zhongzhao is already in our hands. Unfortunately, this place has suffered years of war, and the people's lives are in dire straits. It's really not suitable for us to fight again. Therefore, Wenzheng's letter suggests that we continue to recruit troops, train our elites, and soothe the people's pain of separation. The year after, we will conquer Beiyuan and Xichang in one fell swoop. Does anyone have any objections to this arrangement? Qiguan Rang had originally wanted to take Zhongzhao as a birthday gift. Unfortunately, things had gone awry. He, who had always had a smooth-sailing life, was plotted against and was almost killed by the troops. Old Ginger was spicier. After Qiguan Rang escaped, he counterattacked. Both the enemy and himself were completely enraged. It was either you or I who died. In the end, Qiguan Rang's luck prevailed. Old Man Sun's reinforcements arrived in time to outflank the enemy. Along the way, some feudal vassals surrendered tactfully, while others would rather die than surrender. In the end, they were all tied up and sent to Wanzhou. Only one feudal vassal was different. They wanted to surrender, but Old Man Sun wouldn't let them. Someone advised the old man not to kill those who surrendered. The old man, who had always been easy to talk to, swore. No one could stop him. It turned out that this family's surname was Nie. It was the Nie family of Zhongzhou that was struggling at death's door, and had played their cards badly. Old Man Sun still knew how to look at the big picture. He didn't exterminate the Nie family. He only wanted the Nie family to hand over the culprit who had killed his son, as well as the culprit's father, mother, and children. I lost my beloved wife and son, and my grandson lost his parents because of this person. The parents of such a disregard for the lives of innocent people should be killed. Kill his parents, kill his children. Let him have a taste of helplessness, pain, and being unable to resist. Sun Wen could still escape Dongqing with his grandson, Sun Lan, and come back many years later for revenge. The idiot in front of him only knew how to kneel and beg for mercy. He was worse than a stray dog. When Old Man Sun personally killed his father, mother, and 5 legitimate children in front of that person, the scene was silent. No one dared to stop him. The only person who could stop him was Qiguan Rang. Not only did he not stop him, but he also wanted to personally hand Old Man Sun his sword. Someone said that the old man was too cruel and cold-blooded. He didn't even spare a child. Qiguan Rang couldn't help but sneer. When these people sympathized with the weak, did they ever think that Old Man Sun was the real victim and the weak? He only wanted to become stronger and seek revenge on the people who had harmed him. Revenge for revenge. Revenge for revenge. The dust had settled in Zhongzhou, but Qiguan Rang couldn't be happy. He wanted to send a big gift on the young lord's birthday, but the time was wrong. Old Man Sun said, "Even if there's no birthday gift, there's a 1-month gift. At the very least, there's a 1-year-old gift." Thus this letter was delivered to him. The messenger ran all the way, and a few horses died. Like a relay, it was finally delivered when the banquet was about to end. Qiguan Rang's generous gift undoubtedly made the halo on Jiang Lian's head shine even brighter. Yes, it was so bright that it could blind people's eyes. The old chief silently held the bottle and sucked on it. His fair face had the vicissitudes of an adult. "Serves you right for kicking my daughter. Otherwise, this extravagance would have been yours." Even the male lead of the main heroine didn't have Wenjung. He tried his best to conquer a country just to celebrate her birth. The old chief rolled his eyes at Jiang Pingji and didn't reply. Of course, she couldn't speak even if she wanted to. The baby's body didn't support this function. Babies grew very fast. They looked different every day. Babies who weren't even 1 year old were at their most adorable. Twins were even more rare. Everyone thought that Princess Lian was quiet and steady, while Princess Yin was lively and active. In the end, Princess Lian used her strength to prove that she was like her mother, while Princess Yin used her, as steady as Mount Tai, lazily to show what it meant to be motionless. Chapter 1811. As the saying goes, tumble, sit, roll, crawl, and walk. It referred to the important stages that children under 1 year old went through. Of course, it was noted that these were normal children. Some children would develop earlier or later, but it didn't matter. Jiang Pingji never thought that early development and late development would appear in the twins at the same time. Princess Lian had only cried once since birth. Even when her diapers were full of urine or feces, she would only frown and look at the people who appeared in her line of sight with teary eyes. She was quiet and didn't cry or make a fuss. She was so cute that she could melt people into a puddle of water. On the contrary, the younger twin sister, Princess Yen, was much more domineering. She had the aura of a baby boss written all over her body. As the two brats grew older, their personalities seemed to have changed. The originally quiet and soft sister became a little tyrant who would feel uncomfortable if she didn't move for a while, the baby boss remained as lazy as a mountain. Therefore, Princess Lian, who had just turned 9 months old, could often be seen swaying from one end of the corridor to the other. The servant woman who was serving her wanted to help her, but her adorable smiling face drooped down and was replaced with a fierce expression. She mumbled something and refused vaguely. The servant woman didn't dare to refuse. She could only bite the bullet and follow behind her. Princess Lien's range of activity expanded from the original baby room to the corridor, then from the corridor to the small courtyard. To make it easier for her to move, the original flowers and decorative hills in the small courtyard were moved away. The pebbled path was also paved with neat wooden boards. The edges and corners were wrapped with soft, thick cloth to prevent her from bumping into anything. With a larger range of activity, she also wanted to try to evolve from walking to running. The results were expected. The little baby's legs were weak. It was already difficult for her to stand firmly and walk, let alone run. After running 2 steps, her knees gave way and she rolled forward. When she fell for the first time, she felt very wronged. Her little face, which always wore a smile, was stifled and tears welled up in her eyes. Just as she was about to cry, her younger sister took a pacifier out of nowhere and put it in her mouth. The pacifier was stained with the eldest brother's favorite milk, which had a slight sweetness to it. Once the pacifier was in her mouth, she subconsciously cheered and forgot to cry. Seeing that the eldest brother was quiet, the second brother accurately pulled the pacifier out of her mouth and put it in his own mouth. Her teeth weren't even fully grown yet, and she would always drool when she slept. It would be better to put a pacifier on her. How could the old commander accept being surrounded by so many people while drooling in his sleep? Such a dark history did not exist. Boss, who was in the middle of kicking. Fortunately, she also had her own pacifier. When the serving maid saw the situation, she brought her pacifier over. Only then did the first prince regain his composure. After playing with the pacifier for a while, she seemed to have gained endless strength from it. She skillfully propped herself up with her 2 hands and slowly stood up. He watched as the whole afternoon went by in an endless loop of walk quickly, jog, fall down, want to cry, put a pacifier to comfort her, recover her energy and continue to walk, jog again, fall down again. Until he ran out of energy and hugged the old general to sleep. The old general didn't move much for the entire afternoon. Other than putting pacifiers into Boss's mouth, he spent the rest of his time lying in various positions and looking at Boss. When the boss insisted on hugging her to sleep, the old general would suck on his pacifier without moving an inch. The only time he was willing to take the initiative to get up was, she tilted her glasses and gave the servant woman who was taking care of her a Bayubiu look. The servant woman had been taking care of her for a few months. She had long understood the meaning behind the little prince's various looks, raised eyebrows, and various small expressions. She carefully picked up the dirty first prince from the side of the little prince. The little prince stood up steadily, and didn't need anyone's help to walk to the toilet cubicle. The toilet was also a small size. After using it, there would be someone to clean and spray deodorant, so there was no need to worry that the smell would stink her. Although she couldn't walk steadily, the old general's pride supported her to complete the arduous task of going to the toilet alone. She didn't want to be carried to the toilet like Boss. As a self-respecting baby, she refused to have anything that violated her privacy, such as the evil open-crotch pants. Of course, she still needed someone else to help her with things like bathing. After solving her physical needs, the old general went back to his sleeping place and lay down to think about life. The twins beside him seemed to have sensed it. They closed their eyes and rolled on the ground. After a while, they hugged the old general with both hands and feet. Tisk, little brats from the Jiang family. The old general accepted the baby's closeness. It was rare that he didn't push her away. She was similar to Jiang Pingji in terms of liking babies. The more they couldn't get something, the more they wanted it. Jiang Pingji had never caught a fish in her life. The old general was no different. He had killed so much that his murderous aura seeped into his soul. He didn't like small animals that were sensitive to smell the most. Her Highness Lien liked her and was close to her, so the old general was happy to treat her like a daughter. Of course, it would be great if the baby didn't bite her face or press half of her body on top of her in her dreams. The baby wasn't heavy, but the old general, who was also a baby, felt a little uncomfortable under the weight. Smiley face, angle. About 10 months later, Boss, who could run 2 steps steadily without falling, discovered a new hobby. She wanted to walk and run hand in hand with her sister. The old commander sternly rejected the proposal. However, an adult couldn't understand a baby's stubbornness. She wouldn't give up until she found a new hobby. NAI. The old general turned over lazily and didn't look at the baby's pitiful and expectant face. Seeing this, Boss got up and walked to the other side to sit down. He raised his hand and patted the old general's shoulder. The old general rolled his eyes and continued to turn over. Just like that, they tossed and turned for 2 hours, until the boss was sleepy and yawning. Her stamina was exhausted smiley face, angle, and she couldn't fight anymore. The old general only needed to turn over while lying down, but she had to repeat the action of getting up, walking, sitting, and getting up again. Naturally, she was more exhausted. Seeing that his persistent sister had finally given up, the old general secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She really didn't want to turn over and over like a pancake. Smiley face, angle, boss covered her small mouth and yawned twice. Suddenly, her small ears trembled, and she became energetic as if she had been injected with chicken blood. Scare. The boss pointed at the door and shouted. After a while, footsteps approached. Wuxia, who was dressed in a lake blue scholar's robe, appeared against the sunlight. Boss got up and ran to Wuxia. She was a few steps away when her knees gave way and she almost fell. Wuxia reached out and caught her steadily, then bowed respectfully. Your subject, Wuxia, greets your highness. Boss said. Scare. The female servant stepped forward and bowed to Wuxia with a respectful expression. She carried the 2 princes to change into a set of clean clothes. Sir, why are you here so early today? While they were waiting, the female official serving the 2 princes greeted Wuxia. There weren't many trivial matters. I came after I was done. My lord has entrusted the important task of teaching your highness to me. I dare not disappoint her. I can only do my best to repay her, Wuxia said with a smile. How are the 2 of you doing today? Chapter 18:12. The maid briefly described the interaction between the eldest and the second. Wuxia smiled as he listened. He was a little glad that this was a twin. The children grew up together and accompanied each other. Even if their parents were busy and neglected them, they would not be too lonely or sad. From the time the children were 4 months old, there was a maid who read books beside them and showed them the commonly used words. When they were 10 months old, Wuxia would come over to teach for 2 hours every afternoon as a teacher. Others thought that the children were too young to understand anything. But Wuxia knew that they had a very good memory. Even if they did not understand, they could leave some impression in their minds. It would be much easier for them to learn in the future. Wuxia sat on the seat in the west wing. The 2 cushions below were side by side for the 2 princes. The servant women carried the children over and placed them on the cushions. The old chief nodded. The eldest pointed at Wuxia and smiled. Hey. Others did not know what hey meant. They thought that it was a nickname given to Wuxia by the eldest. Only the old chief knew. Jiangpingji once called Wuxia Zixiao. The eldest, who had just woken up, heard it. But she could not pronounce the word Zixiao. She settled for hey. Wuxia formally bowed to the 2 of them and began the day's lecture. In an ordinary family, it would be good if the 2 10-month-old children could sit still without crying or making a fuss. The 2 princes' reactions were very magical. They sat quietly without crying or making a fuss. Their serious expressions made it seem as if they could really understand. Smiley face, angle, except for the old chief, the other real baby could not possibly understand. She only inherited her mother's love for beauty and had a natural liking for Wuxia. The beautiful person sat not far away and spoke softly. Even if she could not understand a word, she could be quiet for the whole afternoon. Soon 2 hours passed. The old chief could still listen with his head nodding. The other one had already fallen into a sweet dream and was sleeping soundly. Wuxia put down the beginner's book in his hand. He got up and carried the eldest in his arms. His posture was very standard. He did not disturb the eldest. Your Highness Yan, Let me carry you back to your room to rest. Wuxia smiled and asked for the child's opinion. The old chief was a movie king with max acting skills. Of course, he could not show that he understood. He just nodded his head sleepily. Wuxia took it that she had agreed and carefully picked up the two babies. Although he was the child's teacher, he was still an outsider. Whatever he did, he had to be under the watchful eyes of the female officials and servants. He put down the child and got up to leave. Before he left, he told the maid what Her Highness needed to review. The female official noted them down one by one before Wuxia left. After Wuxia left, the young female official sighed with emotion. Sir Wei treats the two young princes very well. He was usually very busy with work, but he could still take 2 hours out of his busy schedule to teach his child, rain or shine. Even a biological father couldn't do this. The maidservant said, "There are many people who treat Her Highness well. As a subject under the Lord, isn't this what he should do?" Only Qiguan Rang, who had offered the country of Zhongzhou as a gift a year ago, would have applauded. To be able to go this far as a subject and a ruler, the word good could no longer be used to describe their relationship. The assistant realized that she had made a slip of the tongue, and quickly thought of a remedy. The old general, who was still in a daze, could not help but pout. Wasn't he her biological father? By the time Jiang Pingji returned, the two princes were almost asleep. Liang. Princess Lian opened her sleepy eyes and sniffed Jiang Pingji. She took the initiative to reach out for a hug. "Have you been good today? Look at how badly you slept. Your cheeks are covered in marks and saliva." Jiang Pingji hugged her eldest daughter and coaxed her. At that moment, the old general got up and rubbed his eyes. The maidservant brought a basin of warm water to wash the two princes' faces and wash away their sleepiness. "Are you hungry? I'll get someone to serve you your meals." This was directed at the second son. The first son understood but did not know how to express himself. It was much easier for the old general to communicate. "Of course I'm hungry." The old general opened his half-awake eyes and yawned to wake up a little. The two children had a special table made according to their size and height. Because they did not know how to use chopsticks, they used a special wooden spoon. It was light and easy to hold. The twins' table was on the left and right side, and the food on the plates was the same. The old general held the spoon steadily. Even though his hand would sometimes shake and stain his nose, 99% of the food went into his stomach. The eldest son's performance was not as outstanding. Even so, she would try her best to use the spoon. If she could not eat, she would bury her face in the basin _ smiley face. Angle _ the maidservant could only stare at her with heartache. She did not dare to help. Which child born to a wealthy family did not have dozens of servants serving them meticulously? Let's not talk about children over 10 months old eating by themselves. Even the teenage Langjun and his wife had to be fed by the maidservants. Not to mention the fact that they had to bury their faces in the basin if they could not eat their fill. Lord Jiang was too harsh on the children. Of course, these thoughts could only be buried in their hearts. They did not even dare to say a word in their dreams. Eating a meal was like fighting a war. Jiang Pingji took a handkerchief and wiped the food off the children's faces. When it was the second son's turn, he coldly refused. The real boss never let people wipe their mouths, just like how she never turned around to look at the explosion when she caused trouble. "You are my daughter now. You don't have to be so cold." The old general was indifferent. The servants are used to judging people. You are not the eldest daughter. If you refuse to interact with me, what if the servants neglect you? The old general could not help but roll his eyes. If the servants forgot their duties and stepped on the young master because the eldest did not value them, wouldn't that reflect the incompetence of the eldest? Such nonsense could be used in novels to shirk responsibility from the parents of the weak, but it would not work if it was used to deceive her. Jiang Pingji had no choice but to use her trump card. "I want to know, where did the spiritual body in the god-slaying saber go?" The old general, who was wiping his face, elegantly paused. His chubby baby face stiffened. Jiang Pingji smiled and rubbed the old general's ears. The soft ears felt as good as her eldest daughter's. "Good girl, what should you call me?" The old general thought about it, and threw away the handkerchief. He reached out to Jiang Pingji for kisses, hugs, and kisses. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to carry her and whispered in her ear, "Is that all you have? Using Azi to threaten me is the same as me using Wuxia to threaten you one day. You are both shameless." The conversation between the mother and daughter was very soft. Even if others saw it, they would only think that the mother and daughter were intimate. They did not know that their eyes were full of sparks. "In a while, I will personally lead the army to attack the North Yuan. I will leave Lianer in your care. Perform well." Jiang Pingji patted the baby's plump butt, which made him glare angrily. "Why didn't you bring him along? Zixia will not follow the army this time. He wants to stay and take care of you." Jiang Pingji smiled. "If I bring him along, will the enemy take the bait?" The old general sneered. "I understand." Chapter 1813. Before Jiang Pingji led the troops to battle, something was put on the agenda. She only remembered it when Wei Xi reminded her. Beiyuan and Xichang were not strong enough, and the world situation was set. There seemed to be no difference whether Jiang Pingji ascended to the throne now or after destroying the two countries. So the question was, where should the capital be located? Regarding the capital, isn't it too early to think about it now? Jiang Pingji was not familiar with these operations, so she naturally did not understand and had no concept. In her opinion, ascending to the throne meant worshipping the heavens and the earth, announcing to the world that she had ascended to the throne, and that she would have to address her as Her Majesty in the future. She thought it was very simple, but in fact, there were many things to prepare in advance, such as the location of the capital. Wei Xi said, "It's not early. If you ascend to the throne, you will start preparing for the construction of the imperial mausoleum after the first year." Jiang Pingji. She had just ascended to the throne, and she was already sending people to build the imperial mausoleum for her? Wei Xi asked with a smile. "Do you think that the imperial mausoleum was built urgently by the emperor?" Jiang Pingji thought about the specifications of the imperial mausoleum described in the history books and was silent. Not to mention the construction standards of this era, even hundreds of years later, it might not be possible to build an imperial mausoleum that met the specifications in a few months. Generally speaking, the imperial mausoleum of the emperor was built soon after ascending to the throne. From the design of the imperial mausoleum, the preparation of materials, the manpower, these were all projects that consumed a lot of resources and money. If the construction was fast enough, it could be completed 2 or 3 years before the emperor's death. It was impossible to make a last-minute effort. The imperial mausoleum was already like this. The capital could not be developed slowly after ascending to the throne, right? Jiang Pingji was speechless and finally slacked off. "This question is indeed, where is the capital of the Jiang dynasty in your previous life? Can't it be decided where it will be in this life?" Wei Xi sighed. He knew that the main leader would say that. "In my previous life, the capital was really a child's play. Even when the world was stable and the people's lives were stable, there were still ministers who suggested moving the capital. It could not be helped. The emperor was too capricious, and the location of the capital was chosen with his eyes closed. In the 10th year of the Jiang dynasty, because the officials in the upper reaches were corrupt, the capital in the middle and lower reaches was flooded for 3 days. Although the flood control was timely and not too many lives were lost, the fertile fields of the people in the suburbs near the capital were flooded, and a year's harvest was destroyed. His Majesty's imperial palace was also soaked in water for 2 days. During those days, the officials went to work in fear and trepidation, dripping water to go to court. If this matter were to spread, it would be shameful. The capital of a country was flooded for 3 days because of a corrupt official. Fortunately, His Majesty's throne was as stable as Mount Tai, and the various crises were handled appropriately, so it did not cause any unrest in the court. Her Highness Jiang Yan's performance in this disaster relief was excellent, and she had completely caught the eyes of the courtiers. In the end, His Majesty finally agreed to move the capital. At the same time, all the officials upstream were to be investigated and held accountable, leaving no one alive. The common people even joked that the blood of the corrupt officials and their family members had dyed the upper reaches red. From this, it could be seen how many people had died in that accident. Wuxia felt that it was a little troublesome to decide on the capital twice. It would be better to choose an imperial capital that everyone was satisfied with from the beginning, and slowly build it into a place that was more prosperous than Wanzhou. With the experience of building Wanzhou, it wouldn't be that difficult to build an imperial capital. Even if they couldn't rush out before the Lord ascended to the throne, they could at least move to the new palace within 2 or 3 years after ascending to the throne. Right? Jiang Pingji was speechless. Although it was to choose a location for the capital, Jiang Pingji was a reserved person. She couldn't say it out loud, so she used a euphemistic excuse. All of them were her old partners. What did their lord not know about peeing? However, the location of the capital was indeed very important. Not only would it affect the continuation of the entire dynasty, but it would also affect the local economy. The location couldn't be randomly decided either. It had to ensure that the capital was easy to defend and difficult to attack. And it also had to ensure that the transportation here was developed to facilitate the development of the economy. At the same time, they had to take into account the control of the imperial capital's troops in various parts of the border. In short, at this time, they needed a charlatan who knew how to survey the dragon's veins. This person proposed to build the capital on the former site of the imperial capital of Zhongzhou. This was the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties, and all the conditions were in line with everyone's expectations. But there were also people who expressed strong objections. What did the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties mean? It meant that 6 of the countries that had built their capitals here had perished. Why? Did they want to gather together and give someone a gift? Gather all 7 Dragon Balls and summon the Dragon God? It was too inauspicious. So that person recommended the land near his ancestral home _ smiley face, angle, _ not to mention anything else. If the location was successfully decided, the price of land and housing would skyrocket. Jiang Pingji sat at the head of the table and listened to their debate. She deeply suspected that these people had bought a lot of houses in those places. Of course, this was just Jiang Pingji's teasing. Apart from Wanzhou, there were no other places where housing prices could really skyrocket. The construction of the capital of a country wasn't a day's work. Although Wanzhou was very prosperous now, no less than any capital in history, it had taken countless people more than 10 years of hard work to build it to its current state. If they chose a barren place to build the capital, it would consume a lot of money and manpower. Jiang Pingji couldn't afford it. In terms of national defense and finance, there weren't many places that Jiang Pingji could choose from. It was best to choose an ancient capital with natural defenses, a construction foundation, and a place where there were tens of thousands of troops stationed nearby. After several rounds of intense discussion and voting, they finally decided on Ping and Fengdu in Sun Prefecture, which was slightly north of Zhongzhou. Most of Zhongzhou's 10 prefectures and 33 counties were rich and fertile. The prefectures and prefectures of the various prefectures and prefectures were also once overflowing with wealth. Sun Prefecture's Ping and Fengdu were once the capital of some small country during the chaotic era of the 16 kingdoms. If Jiang Pingji decided to set the capital there, it would look like a capital city in 2 or 3 years. To truly develop their economy, they would have to take their time after moving in. Sooner or later, they would surpass Wanzhou. If it wasn't for the fact that Wanzhou wasn't suitable to be the imperial capital, Jiang Pingji really didn't want to move. After deciding on Ping and Fengdu, everyone said that the name had to be changed. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Aren't you asking for too much? It sounds good to me. A few insiders muttered to themselves. It was one thing for their lord to be terrible at naming, but she was also obsessed with the aesthetics of names. Ping and Fengdu were fine, but Fengdu was in big trouble. Where was plentiful city? Fengdu was also known as Fengdu. According to myths and legends, it was the entrance to the netherworld, the place where people went after death. How could the son of heaven and the son of hell live in the same place with the same name? We can't find someone to discuss with the emperor of Fengdu and ask him to change his name, right? So, the plan that everyone gave was to change the name, to change it to an auspicious name. Oh, there was no need to adopt the Lord's suggestion. The name of the imperial capital was to be recorded in the annals of history. They didn't want to make a dark history and be mocked by future generations. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Chapter 1814. In the previous life, the capital was finally moved to Pingfengdu, right? Jiang Pengji asked Wei Xi. The latter had maintained a sweet smile since the meeting ended, which made her very unhappy. Wei Xi said, "Everything has its own arrangement. Pingfengdu's terrain is coherent, and the dragon's vein is complete. It is indeed a treasured place." In the previous life, the ministers were also noisy and finally decided on Pingfengdu. The unlucky Pingfengdu did not escape the fate of changing its name in this life. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath. "Zixiao, you've changed. You've become somewhat mischievous. Could it be that all men who became fathers would evolve in this direction?" Wei Xi was well versed in pacifying people. He sighed and said, "I'm reluctant to leave you on the expedition. It will be another year or two." Although Wei Xi's mischievous interest had nothing to do with her expedition, Jiang Pengji still liked to hear him say that. Her heart warmed. But if Wei Xi knew what she had done, he would probably be heartbroken. Jiang Pengji raised her arms and circled his neck. The two of them hugged each other quietly in the deserted corridor. The setting sun shone on them, casting an intimate silhouette. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath and suppressed the slight guilt in her heart. Her perplexity was swept away, and there was only determination left in her eyes. "If I go on an expedition, are you really not willing to go to other places? There is a shortage of people everywhere. Are you really willing to waste your precious time in the rear?" Jiang Pengji did not request Wei Xi not to follow the army this time. It was his own request because his child was in the rear, and he had to take care of it. This reminded her of what the salted fishes once said. She earned money outside to support her family, while Wei Xi took care of everything in the rear, like a good wife and mother. Smiley face, angle. In reality, the chief butler was actually Su Ke. However, Wei Xi's sacrifice was no less than Su Ke's. There were only a few years left in the war. It was equivalent to him giving up on the literary examination at the last moment. Wen Zheng and Old Man Sun relied on their previous military achievements and their valiant achievements in Zhongzhou. Their points were firmly in the top 3. If there were no accidents, their ranking was stable. After that, the competition was fierce. Wei Xi once told her that he would recall the literary examination after his rebirth, but now he chose to give up? Jiang Pengji was touched, but she did not want Wei Xi to make sacrifices and give in to his career for her and their child. After all, she wasn't a man in the salted fish plain who needed his wife to sacrifice her job to take care of the family. Wei Xi said, "This is not a waste. The most important thing is to take good care of the two princes." Jiang Pengji looked straight into Wei Xi's eyes. Under the glow of the setting sun, she felt that the man in front of her seemed to have sensed what she wanted to do, which was why he insisted on staying. But how was this possible? Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh. She buried these thoughts deep in her heart. When she was analyzing sincerity with Wei Xi in the past, she did reveal the existence of the main body of the system, but she only mentioned it briefly. According to Wei Xi's understanding, the system itself was a powerful existence, but it had yet to surpass the limits of humans. If Wei Xi knew that this thing was close to the gods that he knew, he would be very worried. How would he be as ignorant as he was now? Did Wei Xi really not feel anything? He was naturally aware of it. After all, he was the person who had slept with him for 2 lifetimes. How could he not be aware of it? However, he didn't know what she wanted to do, so he could only try his best to help her achieve what she wanted. In this aspect, he and Qiguan Rang were the same. It was just that the latter was high profile, while he was low-key and introverted. Wei Xi was used to the other party's arrangement of grass snakes, gray lines, and thousands of miles of veins. He reviewed his experience after his rebirth several times and more or less discovered that something was wrong. Wanzhou was probably a dangerous place second only to the front lines. His 2 daughters were still here. How could he leave? Qiguan Rang had helped her recover Zhongzhou. He also hoped to assist her in eradicating the great threat in her heart. But he only hoped that it was not that person. Otherwise, the Lord would probably feel terrible. The family ate together. Jiang Pengji dismissed the servants. Only then did Wei Xi dare to approach his daughter. Although it was said to be intimate, in fact, he still maintained a certain distance between the ruler and the minister. He did not dare to forget his identity, for even a moment. The Lord doesn't let the maids serve you meals. After all, Her Highness Lian is young. Her Highness Yan eats steadily, but she also needs to be taken care of. Jiang Pengji said. You haven't even fed me one mouthful at a time. What right do you have to let these two little ones take the lead? The old chief's hand that was holding the wooden spoon paused. He faintly rolled his eyes at Jiang Pengji. The boss didn't understand their flirtatious words, but she did. Couldn't they consider her feelings before flirting and driving? Not only was it not enough to eat, but she was also being fed dog food? Wei Xi smiled helplessly. He carried Her Highness Lian in his arms and sat on his knees. Wow. The boss liked Wei Xi the most. If the other maids wanted to touch her, they had to get permission. Wei Xi was an exception. Jiang Pengji realized that her daughter was really obsessed with appearances. When Wei Xi was feeding her, she ate 5 times more than usual. The boss pointed at the porridge and said, I want this time. Wei Xi used a small fan to fan the porridge in the wooden spoon until it was warm enough for her to eat. After the meal, the boss ate until her belly was round. On the contrary, Wei Xi left without taking 2 bites. The old chief looked at the blushing boss and said coldly, Do you want to change the plan? Why? The old chief said, Wei Xi most likely knows that I'm not his daughter. At first, Wei Xi quite liked to hug the old chief, but he didn't know when he started to keep a fixed distance. The distance wasn't the distance between a ruler and an official, but between a man and a woman. Jiang Pengji said, Explain it after it's over. If you tell him now, you'll be harming him. The old chief glanced at her. You'll have to be single sooner or later. How could this kind of trash be single? Did Yu Lao forget to wear his reading glasses when he tied the rope? I have nothing to fear from being favored. Zixiao understands my difficulties, and I'm grateful for his understanding and understanding. How can you understand this kind of tacit understanding that doesn't require verbal communication? Jiang Pengji's words were quite provocative. She changed the topic and said in a tone as if she was saying her last words. Chief, I'll leave Zixiao to you. Jiang Pengji's tone suddenly became serious. The old chief couldn't refute her solemn expression. Your daughter wants me to protect, and so does your husband. What about you? Jiang Pengji said with a face full of vicissitudes. Only one of us can live. Zixiao and the child can only be safe if the system loses. I originally prepared for the worst, such as the death of the whole family, but the old chief gave me a new idea. It was time for everyone to reveal their trump cards in this round of poker. Whoever won or lost depended on what happened next. Jiang Pengji sacrificed herself, Wei Xi, the 2 children, and even the destiny of the country. If she still couldn't bait out the system and get rid of it in one fell swoop, her trump card would really be gone. The Federation probably also considered this point, so they arranged for the old chief to back her up. If she was finished, wouldn't the old chief come out to finish her off? So, you've even schemed against me. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, It's just this once. I'm seriously entrusting my life to you. Either Jiang Pengji would turn the tables, or she would be overturned by the sky's brain. As her pace of unifying the world quickened, the sky's brain became more and more impatient. After plotting for more than 10 years and feigning civility for more than 10 years, she had enough. Chapter 1815. Wenzheng. Jiang Pengji led 100,000 troops to the north and met up with Qiguan Rang, who had set off earlier. When the ruler and his minister, who had not seen each other for nearly 3 years, saw each other, the salted fish in the streaming room silently spammed the cold couple. Even though Jiang Pengji and Qiguan Rang were destined to be together, the fans of the couple still insisted on picking up sweets from them. They were so stubborn that it made people feel sad. Jiang Pengji was not in the mood to see the salted fish holding up the evil cult flag. She hurriedly dismounted from her horse and helped Qiguan Rang, who had been waiting for her outside Shui City early in the morning. She glanced at Qiguan Rang's exposed hands, which were red from the cold, and could not help but blame him for not taking care of himself. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "When I heard that my lord had arrived with troops today, I was overjoyed. How could I care about these things?" Feng Zhen and Li Yin also rushed over on horseback. They felt that their lord was getting more capricious as she got older. Jiang Pingji said, "I originally wanted you to lead the troops to Xichang. The weather there is better. I heard that people only wear autumn clothes in this season, but you had to invite troops to attack Beiyuan. Are you not satisfied with attacking Zhongzhou yet? Must you come to Beiyuan to cause trouble and cripple your body?" Her words were not very polite, but those who knew her could tell that she said this because she was concerned about Qiguan Rang. The geography and climate of Beiyuan were completely different from Zhongzhou. There were 5 countries in the world, each with a wide terrain and different climate. Zhongzhou had the largest area, the most fertile land, and the most powerful national power. It had always been in existence that the other 4 countries coveted, but dared not touch. North Abyss was different. North Abyss was a big place, but it was really poor. It was a cold, poor, and bitter place. Winter was long and spring and summer were short. Its terrain was even more northerly than Beizhou, the northern borderline. Its people were tough but ignorant and backward. Jiang Pingji could not bear for Qiguan Rang to come here to suffer. It was better to assist Fu Wang and Meng Hun in killing the people in Xichang. Although Xichang was a chaotic place, the climate was warm and mild. It was a good place to recuperate while fighting and accumulating military merits. Qiguan Rang's attack on Zhongzhou ended in failure. He was tricked by the enemy. Although he counterattacked beautifully, he also suffered arrow wounds in his thigh and arm. If he did not take good care of these 2 areas, he would suffer when he grew old and became cold the day after. In comparison, Old Man's son gave her a lot less trouble. At first, the old man had wanted to ask for permission, but Jiang Pingji had left him in Zhongzhou's Bianzhou to be the magistrate. On the surface, it seemed like she wanted him to be in charge of all matters in Bianzhou and restore the war-ravaged Bianzhou to its former glory. In reality, she wanted the old man to rest there for a while. She was worried that Grandpa's son would misunderstand, so she wrote a long private letter to express her concern for his health. Old Man's son looked at the secret letter for a long time, then carefully put it away, planning to pass it down as a family heirloom. The secret letter written by the number 1 female star emperor, who was cold to outsiders and talkative to insiders, was qualified to be a family heirloom. Old Man's son had always paid attention to his health. It was not difficult for Jiang Pingji to persuade him, but Qiguan Rang was different. Too desperate. If Qiguan Rang was still the young man in his 20s, Jiang Pingji would have let him do whatever he wanted. What about now? He was already past 40. In this era, this age was considered the end of middle age. Jiang Pingji wanted him to rest. If there was a war, he should go to Xichang to fight, but he refused. He had to ask for permission to come to Beiyuan, and he wrote letters more than once. She could not refute him too many times, lest her subordinates think that Qiguan Rang had lost his loyalty. In the end, she agreed. He was reprimanded as soon as they met. Qiguan Rang was already mentally prepared. He nodded repeatedly and said yes. He did not retort. He knew his lord. She was a standard person who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. At this time, she could not bear to say more. As expected, Jiang Pingji changed the topic after saying a few words. She asked about the training of the troops and horses, as well as the preparation of rations. Qiguan Rang had rehearsed these questions countless times. He answered whatever she asked. He covered all aspects and was thorough in every aspect. Jiang Pingji and he entered the city one after the other. The bullet screens on the screen became even more vigorous. Sans Hisongshi snacking. I've fallen in love with a cold couple. I'm destined to be. Today the officials are giving out candy. Even though there are glass shards, I'll still eat it. Liangpin Puzi snacking. Underscore smiley face. Angle. Underscore this is the first time I've thought about supporting an NPC. The streamer seems to be compatible with anyone. Bikeaway snacking. I remember that a while ago, There was a guru on Bilibili who edited a personality-changing story about palace intrigue. It perfectly fulfilled the needs of all the streamers. The editing of that video was too crazy. All the concubines were scheming against each other. The immortals were fighting. All kinds of blackening, all kinds of reversals, and all kinds of designs made me want to kneel on my knees. Fortunately, the Emperor is our streamer. Otherwise, who would be able to tame these little demons? Tudorfecio. I watched that video. Big Boss Wen Zheng fought all the way until he was stabbed to death by the blackened Zixiao. *CK the plot. I'm too handsome. #kneel and cry. That video was really awesome. My heart trembles when I see Zixiao's smile now. Beauty CI is so gentle, elegant, a gentleman, open and aboveboard, and broad-minded. How could he be so blackened? It's a nightmare. Gue Kai Guo Fengxiao. Isn't the real nightmare when the blackened Zixiao is finally poisoned to death by the Emperor? All the love is a *king drama. My heart hurts when I watch it. Now I have psychological trauma when I watch the live stream. Why don't we use Jianqun, who edited the video, to suppress the Emperor and sacrifice him to heaven? You can even think of such a crazy idea of having everyone be killed. Newspaper office. Jiang Pingji and Qiguan Rang had just understood the situation in Beiyuan. When she raised her head and glanced at the bullet screen, she could not keep up with everyone's topic again. After all, she was a veteran streamer who had been streaming conscientiously for more than 10 years. Why did they blacken her like this? My lord, are you unhappy? Jiang Pingji gulped down a glass of warm wine and warmed herself with the strong alcohol. Beiyuan killed itself and almost gave me the country for free. Why should I be unhappy? Although she said so, there was no trace of joy on her face. Qiguan Rang knew that his lord was unhappy in her heart. To be honest, Beiyuan was too poor. Qiguan Rang could not think of how much fat could be squeezed out of this country. Sending 250,000 troops to attack was already giving them face. Have the winter clothes for the soldiers been distributed? Although it was said so, the 5 countries in the world were born as one. No matter how poor Beiyuan was, it could not be separated. It had to be recovered. All of them have been distributed. That's good. Have a good winter. Let the soldiers practice more and familiarize themselves with this terrible weather. If it were not for the fact that this war had to be fought, Jiang Pingji really could not bear to let her soldiers come here to suffer in the cold. After Jiang Pingji arrived, she was busy for 2 days. On the 3rd day, everything was on track. At this time, the scouts found hundreds of suspicious people. They arrested all of them and waited for Jiang Pingji to deal with them. After investigating, Feng Zhen reported, the people who fled from Beiyuan said that they could not survive. They hope that my lord can take them in. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, fled? There are people seeking refuge with me when the war is about to start. Is the royal family of Beiyuan so unpopular? Feng Zhen evaluated indifferently. The royal family of Beiyuan is just a group of puppets who are manipulated and have no control over themselves. How can they unite the people? Chapter 1816. Beiyuan was a strange country. Beiyuan was able to establish a country because of a very dramatic reason. Different from Dongqing, Zhongzhou, Nanxing and Xichang countries, although the aristocrats were powerful, the royal family always restrained their growth and tried various ways to weaken them. Beiyuan was different. Not only did they allow the aristocrats to grow, but they also foolishly passed a system that was extremely beneficial to the aristocrats. The aristocrats' official position was passed down from generation to generation. To ensure the interests of the aristocrats, they also stipulated that the aristocrats could not be killed unless they committed treason or regicide. With such a guarantee, the development of the aristocrats in Beiyuan could be described as a blowout. As long as a man was born in an aristocratic family, he would be able to enter the officialdom and obtain an official position after he reached adulthood. As a result, all the positions with real power and benefits were occupied by the aristocratic families. The royal family became a human-shaped stamp machine, and their right to speak in politics was frighteningly weak. Some aristocrats tried their best to have children in order to expand their family's influence. As long as the family could afford it, they would be willing to die. Anyway, when the children grew up, they would definitely become officials. Even if it was a small official, there would be a qualitative change when there were a lot of them. With this idea, after decades of development in Beiyuan, the group of aristocrats had expanded to a terrible number. This also affected the inheritance rights and interests of the lineal descendants, so there was a clear distinction between legitimate children and illegitimate children. Legitimate children were certainly noble, while illegitimate children were a little higher than commoners, but they were servants and slaves in front of legitimate children. Beiyuan was like a dynasty that was adjusted at an accelerated speed. After only a few decades of establishment, serious land annexation problems were exposed. The interest groups led by the aristocrats were insatiable. They ate too much and the country could not collect taxes, causing the national treasury to be empty and the country to be poor. There was a widely spread saying in Beiyuan. The emperor was just a broken doll that the aristocrats could play with at will. Indeed, the aristocrats led by the Yi family in Beiyuan took turns to govern and stage coups. Beiyuan had never been peaceful. It was said that there were as many as 20 coups in a year, and the shortest regime lasted only half a day. It was equivalent to XX force just getting rid of the enemy force, and before they could be proud of it for a few hours, the latecomers secretly stole their heads. The people of Beiyuan were also miserable. In 5 years, the currency was changed 6 times and the measurement units were changed 4 times. The worst part was that the XX faction had just issued some sort of order, and the people below were busy implementing it. After 4 or 5 months, there was still no effect, and the XX faction had taken over again. The AA faction overturned all of their predecessors' arrangements and brought out their own original works. The people of the North Abyss. In his heart, he wanted to curse at these idiots 10,000 times. With great difficulty, the largest aristocratic family of Beiyuan, the Yi family, stood out from the various factional struggles and pushed the royal family to wear their own dragon robes. The people finally heaved a sigh of relief, just when they hoped that the new emperor would be smarter and not cause trouble again. These people broke the bottom line again. The first thing Wuxia did after ascending to the throne was to confer the title of king to every direct descendant of the Yi family. This was a hereditary title, and their salaries were of the highest class. For a moment, he was proud of himself. Smiley face. Angle. The higher-ups had also said that in order to fight for more authority in the court, the landowning households had fought hard to survive. Even though they had beaten the bastard children into low-class people, the number of direct descendants was still very large. According to a later world record, the patriarch of XX aristocratic family in the North Abyss had a total of 369 wives in his lifetime. All year round, he slept with 1 wife a day, and the other 4 had to wait. The number of children was even more horrifying. 412 sons and 398 daughters. Smiley face. Angle. In order to increase the number of so-called legitimate children, they could have 9 wives at the same time and unlimited concubines. Although the Yi family was not so horrifying, there were still more than 100 direct descendants of the Yi family. In other words, in a place with a small population like the North Abyss, there were more than 100 hereditary titles of king all at once. How could the national treasury afford the highest salary for every king? After receiving half a year's salary, they were so poor that they only had their underwear. In order to appease them, the new royal family of the North Abyss could only think of ways to squeeze more money from the people. What? Reduce the king's salary and remove their titles? No way. They were all from the Yi family and held great power. If they were angered, they would lose their heads in the middle of the night. Smiley face. Angle. Anyway, the people were just ants. Why would ants need people to have such a big appetite? Cut. The money in the people's pockets was like a sponge that could still be squeezed. The North Abyss was located in the north. It was only warm for a few months a year, and the rest of the year was very cold. The environment was harsh, and it was not easy for crops to survive. The land produced little food. In order to stabilize the national situation, the agricultural tax could not be high. Even if the government only collected 20%, the people had to scrimp for a whole year to feed their families. However, In order to appease the kings, the Yi family repeatedly raised taxes on the people and added complicated tax items to increase the national treasury's income. When the tax was at its heaviest, the government collected 90% of the agricultural tax, and the remaining 10% of the grain tax had to be exploited. Within the North Abyss, countless people froze and starved to death. During the years when Jiang Pingji was at war, the North Abyss had coveted the fat meat of Dongqing. They had also heard of how rich and prosperous Wanzhou was and dreamed of taking it for themselves. But the North Abyss was so chaotic. Where did they get the financial resources, equipment, and military supplies? The soldiers of the day were just poor people who had sneaked in to get some hot porridge. The real elites were the private soldiers of the gentry, the minions of the evil spirits in the eyes of the people, and the North Abyss still wanted to squeeze out troops to expand and invade her rear? Jiang Pingji only gave them 2 words, haha. Before the Yi family came to power, the barren North Abyss could still gather more than 100,000 decent troops, which gave Jiang Pingji a certain amount of pressure. This was also why she asked Qi Guanrang to hold back his troops to prevent the North Abyss from jumping out and stirring things up. Now that the Yi family had been in power for almost 2 years, the entire North Abyss was like a broken doll. Jiang Pingji really thought highly of the North Abyss by bringing 250,000 troops. TSK. Outsiders thought that Jiang Pingji was using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Only Qi Guanrang knew that she brought so many troops to kill all the gentry in the North Abyss. Among the 5 countries in the world, the number of gentry in the other 4 countries added up was less than the number of gentry in the North Abyss. The gentry in the North Abyss were especially superstitious about bloodlines. The deformed N kinds of privilege theory of the gentry was deeply rooted in their bones. A group of malignant tumors. If she really absorbed it, she was afraid that she would get cancer. When Fengzhen told her that they had captured more than 100 refugees from the North Abyss, she was deep in thought. Qi Guanrang said, "Actually, there were refugees who flocked to Shui City before, but I made the decision to expel them." Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "What if they couldn't?" Qi Guanrang said, "Give them dry rations and send soldiers to send them away. If they are still stubborn, kill them as an example to others. If not, kill them all." Although the refugees from the North Abyss were pitiful, they couldn't allow them to enter their territory and threaten the lives of the people there. When Qi Guanrang arrived at the border, he heard that many refugees from the North Abyss had robbed the local people of their money and rations, killed people, and raped them. These people couldn't be allowed to live. As for those who hadn't escaped in time, he was much gentler. He mainly drove them away and killed them when they couldn't escape. If it were anyone else, they would probably be scolded to death. But Qi Guanrang never cared about such things for the sake of the overall situation. He wouldn't be soft-hearted to the people of the enemy country and put his own people in danger. Similarly, he didn't have to be soft-hearted to this group of people who had crossed the border. However, Fengzhen said, "It's just, my lord, one of them claims to be your old friend." Jiang Pingji asked, "What's his name?" Fengzhen answered, "Ma Xiao." An image of a somewhat quiet but clear-eyed youth immediately appeared in Jiang Pingji's mind. The acquaintance from the Langyi Academy was indeed an old friend. I remember Xiaoyin saying that the fertile fields of Ma Xiao's family were occupied and plundered by bandits. In order to avoid disaster, he had no choice but to move his family north. There had been no news of him for many years. It never occurred to her that he had gone to the North Abyss to avoid disaster. Chapter 1817. Avoid disaster? Go north with his family? Going to Beiyuan to avoid disaster, that's also. Why didn't he look for you back then? No matter what, he could at least protect you. When Fengzhen said this, it was obvious that a well-fed man did not know the hunger of a starving man. Jiang Pingji said helplessly, "Nanxing was in chaos. After the Nanman disaster, the flames of war spread throughout Nanxing. Jiqing obviously couldn't go to Nanxing. To go to Zhongzhou, he would have to pass through the territories of several feudal lords, and there would be countless bandits along the way. Whether he could reach Zhongzhou alive is still a problem. After thinking about it, Beiyuan is the only way out. Even if life is hard, he won't die under the knives and swords of the bandits." Ma Xiu's family was well off. They had a lot of fertile land, and could be considered a wealthy landlord. Even if he didn't have any prospects for the rest of his life, he could still live comfortably. He belonged to a poor family, and was considered well off. However, what was the use of having fertile land? When the world was in chaos, how many people would fish in troubled waters to burn, kill, and loot? Small wealthy families like Ma Xiu, who had some property but could not protect themselves, were the favorite fat sheep of the bandits. The profits were high and the risks were low. They could live comfortably for a while with just one job. Ma Xiu had no choice but to pack his luggage and flee north. It was expected. Feng Zhen heard the displeasure in Jiang Pingji's voice and chose to shut up with a strong desire to live. Qi Guanrang discreetly glanced at Feng Zhen. How old was this wastrel already? Even now he still had a big mouth. No matter how well Ma Xiu was doing, or why he chose to go north to avoid disaster instead of relying on the Lord. He was still the Lord's classmate and close friend when they were young. Not to mention how to respect and take care of him. He couldn't kick him when he was down or ridicule him. Of course, Qi Guanrang also believed that his lord wouldn't care about Feng Zhen's slip of the tongue because of Ma Xiu. However, it was better to avoid such incidents. The harmony between the ruler and the minister was the result of both parties working together. Feng Longzi should learn from this. Jiang Pingji said. Why didn't he look for me? Maybe he didn't want trouble. His personality has always been like this. Ma Xiu, courtesy name Jiqing. He studied at Langyi Academy when he was young. He was one of Jiang Pingji's best classmates. Compared to the others, Ma Xiu did not have a high presence among the five of them. Most of the time, he was just passively joining in on the fun. His personality was rather taciturn. As long as he felt that he could solve the problem by himself, he would definitely not trouble people he was familiar with. Calculating the time, when Ma Xiu went north to seek refuge, Jiang Pingji had just taken over Xiangyang district. It was the most difficult period in the beginning. Internally they were poor. Their simple and crude team was like a grassroots team. Externally they had countless battles to fight, fighting this and that. In the early years, if she wasn't the one fighting others, others would take the initiative to pick a fight with her. She was still the one being looked down upon. Under such circumstances, with Ma Xiu's neutral character, he naturally avoided it. He did not want to cause trouble for Jiang Pingji, nor did he want to take any risks. From today's perspective, it was Ma Xiu's loss that he didn't choose to help Jiang Pingji. Otherwise, he would definitely be one of the important ministers. But who could say that Ma Xiu's choice was wrong based on the situation at that time? No one can. It wasn't just Ma Xiu. Most people would have made the same choice if they were in that situation. The only thing they didn't understand was, Jiang Pingji had pacified Dongqing for so many years. Hadn't Ma Xiu heard the news? The situation in Beiyuan was not chaotic. There were no wars everywhere, but the number of people who starved or froze to death was no less than in the chaos of war. It wasn't until Jiang Pingji led her troops to Shui City and pointed her sword at Beiyuan that Ma Xiu fled. This was somewhat thought-provoking. Qi Guanrang and Feng Zhen obviously thought of this, but the latter had just been unlucky, so Qi Guanrang could only speak. My lord, do you suspect that Ma Xiu might be a spy sent by Beiyuan? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Jiqing likes to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. He is cautious and careful, but he is not stupid. What's the use of him being a pawn for Beiyuan? How long can Beiyuan resist me in this state? In the end, is Beiyuan more likely to win or me? He was very clear about these questions. Even if he is really a spy from Beiyuan, he came here to surrender to me and then stab Beiyuan in the back. Qi Guanrang shook his head in disagreement. It makes sense, but my lord must not believe it easily. Ma Xiu has sneaked into the refugees and fled here. The timing is somewhat coincidental. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, I know. I will understand these worries when I see him. Smart people like to complicate things. Even Jiang Pingji was no exception. When she really saw Ma Xiu, her previous conspiracy theories and speculations disappeared like smoke in thin air. She could only sigh. Jiqing. When Ma Xiu was brought to meet her, Jiang Pingji looked at his face for a long time, but she still could not find traces of the past on his old and tired face. She only felt a lump in her throat and could not speak for a long time. Ma Xiu was not the oldest among the 5, but he looked no different from an old man in his 70s. There was not much black in his messy hair, it was all white. Not only was his hair white, but the skin on his face was wrinkled and dry. There were also frostbite cracks left by years of cold. He took 2 steps forward on the ground, slowly bent down and gave a deep bow. It was obvious that he wanted to be as standard as possible, but his red and swollen hands and weak legs were trembling uncontrollably. Jiang Pingji suddenly stood up and supported him. His arms were so thin that only skin and bones were left. She did not dare to use any strength. I haven't seen you for more than 10 years. How are you, Lanting? Ma Xiu smiled weakly. His voice was old and hoarse like an old man's. His familiar tone made Jiang Pingji feel a sense of familiarity. Lanting. Maybe you are the only one who still calls me that. Jiang Pingji could not help but smile bitterly. The whole world knew that she had changed her name. She did not expect that Ma Xiu, who was hiding in Beiyuan to avoid trouble, did not hear the news and still called her by her old name. Ma Xiu's old face showed a bit of awkwardness. As a commoner, it is indeed disrespectful to call the emperor by his name, Jiang Pingji said. No, I gave up that name because some complicated reasons. It is not because of my identity. Ma Xiu did not ask for details. He chose to remain silent like he did in the past. Lu Zheng rushed over when he heard the news. When he saw the old man in the hall, he could not recognize him as Ma Xiu. Ma Xiu was only 7 or 8 years older than Jiang Pingji, but they looked more like grandfather and grandson. What had Ma Xiu experienced all these years? You are Xiaoyin. Ma Xiu carefully recognized Lu Zheng a few times, but the latter stood a little far away. His eyes were not good, so he could not see clearly. It took him a while to recognize him. Yes. Chapter 1818. Ma Xiu was not only a refugee, but also a fugitive slave. When they heard him narrate the story in a calm tone, Jiang Pingji and Lu Zheng both felt a surge of suppressed anger. Back then, Ma Xiu did flee to the relatively stable North Abyss to avoid trouble. But he didn't expect that compared to the bloody chaos, the Beiyuan was more painful to kill people. When Ma Xiu and his family fled, they brought money with them. He also knew that one should not show one's wealth, so he was careful all the way and did not attract covetous eyes. After arriving at the Beiyuan, trouble came one after another. Ma Xiu was a commoner, and the status of commoners in the Beiyuan was much lower than what was rumored. At that time, there were many commoners in Dongqing who fled to the Beiyuan to avoid trouble like Ma Xiu. The Beiyuan government treated them like animals. Corvée labor was the heaviest, and taxes were the most numerous. People were almost exploited to death. When Ma Xiu realized the situation in the Beiyuan and wanted to leave, there was a coup in the court of the Beiyuan. The faction that came to power through the coup was harsher to the commoners and fugitives. If they could not collect taxes, they were directly banished to lowly status and sold. Some scholars from poor families in the Beiyuan were angry and tried to reason with them, but they ended up with their arms and legs being pinched and blood flowing. Ma Xiu and his family's savings could not withstand such exploitation, so they naturally found a way to leave. However, it was a wolf's den. It was easy to enter but difficult to leave. The population of the Beiyuan was the smallest among the 5 countries. The people who left the country were strictly controlled. Later on, anyone who left would be beaten to death. Ma Xiu could only restrain himself and look for opportunities. At this time, a disaster fell from the sky and hit him head-on. In order to resist the faction that came to power, a group of knowledgeable people gathered and called themselves the new faction. They planned to use the coup and assassination method to make the old faction step down. As a result, they were discovered by the leader of the old faction before they took action. They took the initiative and wiped out the new faction. It was not accurate to say wiped out because there was a fish that escaped the net. The fish that escaped the net swam to the back door of Ma Xiu's house and fell in the snow. He was rescued by his wife who went out to buy goods. The old faction came to the door, and Ma Xiu and his family were arrested for harboring criminals. Their property was confiscated, and they were banished to lowly status. Ma Xiu became a handyman in the backyard of the Beiyuan aristocrats. His wife and daughter were taken away and sold to brothels. His son was sold cheaply. The wife blamed herself and committed suicide by ramming herself against a pillar. Her daughter left behind a child of an unknown benefactor, who died of an illness in a dark alley. His youngest son, on the other hand, was beheaded by the bloodthirsty Yi-clan private soldiers during the Yi-clan's forced abdication. Ma Xiu was sold again and again with his young granddaughter. In the end, he became a veteran guard of a small town near the border. Hearing that the enemy was going to attack, Ma Xiu packed his luggage and followed the refugees to Snow City on foot. Before coming here, Ma Xiu was actually prepared to die. On the way, he had heard about Qiguan Rang's ruthless killing of the refugees. He knew that his decision was the right one. He also knew that he would die if he tried to force his way in. But considering that he was once a citizen of Dongqing, he did not wish for his remains to be returned to his homeland. He only hoped that his granddaughter could be pitted. She could be adopted by someone or bought. If that was not possible, she could accompany him to be buried under the walls of Snow City, which was the closest city to Dongqing. Refugees like them had to walk on their feet. Ma Xiu was still all right. At the very least, he had a pair of old shoes that he had taken off someone's body. There were also many people who were barefoot. Before they reached Snow City, they were discovered by the patrolling cavalry scouts, and all of them were captured. They thought they were going to die, but they did not expect the soldiers to let them take their rations. They told them to go back to where they came from, and not to think about sneaking into Dongqing. Ma Xiu heard the refugees around him hugging their heads and crying. He also learned the identity of the enemy's leader from some of the refugees. In a trance, he felt as if he had encountered a glimmer of hope when he was at the end of his rope. Grandpa. His granddaughter was very skinny. Her head was big and her body was small. Every time he saw her like that, he was worried that she would break her neck. Ma Xiu said, "Don't worry. Grandpa has an idea." Although he said that, he was not confident at all. Even so, he was still determined to meet Jiang Pingji and told her his name. No one thought that Ma Xiu, the old man, had anything to do with the master of the world. Even Ma Xiu himself felt enlightened. When he was young, he really knew such a person. Or, those memories of his youth were just a daydream of this old man? When he waited anxiously and was summoned to see Jiang Pingji, it was as if time had turned back. He not only saw the dignified female vassal in front of him, but also the young man in red who was laughing and cursing in Langya County. They were two completely different scenes, but at that moment, they overlapped in front of his eyes. They fit together perfectly, regardless of the person or the scene. Time flies. Time treats me like snow and knives, but you are still a young man in fresh clothes. When he told these things, Ma Xiu's turbid eyes did not have a trace of emotion. It was not the calmness after experiencing snow and wind, but a lifeless silence. Jiang Pingji sent people to help Ma Xiu settle down, and sent a doctor to take his pulse. Ma Xiu smiled and thanked her. The doctor took his pulse, prescribed medicine, and replied to Jiang Pingji, "He is like a lamp that has run out of oil. If we use precious medicine to keep him alive, he will only have a few months left." Doctors could cure stubborn diseases, but they could not save a person who was at the end of his life. The only thing Jiang Pingji could do was to let Ma Xiu live a better life in his last days, and live a little longer. Her hand that was correcting official documents paused. The ink dripped and black dots appeared. "How much longer can he live?" The doctor said, "Late spring and early summer next year." Jiang Pingji waved her hand. "You may leave. I understand." Today's streaming room was very quiet. The naughty salted fish did not say anything flirtatious. Qiguan Rang asked her, "What is my lord thinking about?" She slowly whispered, "Late spring and early summer next year. Will the world be united?" In another place, Ma Xiu and Lu Zheng were looking at each other silently. Ma Xiu's granddaughter was holding a fragrant and soft meat patty, and chewing it slowly. Everyone has their own fate. It's just fate. Why does Xiaoyin look so sad? Lu Zheng laughed at himself. "I'm usually cold and hard, but I seem to be especially sad today." Ma Xiu smiled. "Today is a rare day of celebration for me in the past 10 years. It was naturally a joyous occasion to find someone to entrust his orphan to before he died. Lu Zheng wanted to say something to comfort him, but he could not say anything when it came to his mouth. Reminiscing about the past was even more nonsensical. For Ma Xiao, who had suffered in the first half of his life, the more beautiful his youth was, the more miserable and painful the second half of his life was. If the two of them really wanted to reminisce about the past, they would only be rubbing salt on Ma Xiao's wounds. If anything happens to you, I will definitely treat this child as my own. Ma Xiao was not pretentious. He waved at the child. The child hesitantly put down the meat patty and sat down beside Ma Xiao's bed. Ma Xiao made a rare joke. In the future, he will be your fake father. Lu Zheng's face darkened. He corrected. It's grandfather. He adopted Ma Xiao's granddaughter as his adopted daughter. He was one generation lower than Ma Xiao for no reason. Chapter 18-19. Ma Xiao couldn't help but say as he looked at his timid granddaughter, who was taken away by the servants to rest. She's a poor child. Lu Zheng said. Bitterness comes after sweetness. Ma Xiao froze for a moment and laughed. You're thinking the same thing as me. Do you know what nickname I gave her? Lu Zheng didn't know. Ma Xiao replied. Oil orange. Oil orange. Ma Xiao nodded. Yes, oil orange. Eating it for a long time will make the body light and prolong life. It's bitter before sweet. It suits her. Oil orange blossoms in spring and produces fruit in summer. Every mid-autumn, late summer, and early autumn, oil orange fruits fill the branches and leaves. It's also resistant to drought and barrenness. It's very adaptable and can be found in some mountains in the south. The fruit tastes slightly bitter before sweet. Lu Zheng understood Ma Xiao's meaning. After a few moments of silence, he asked, What's her name? I haven't given it yet. In a place like Beiyuan, a child like her doesn't need a name. It's good enough to have a humble name. Ma Xiao was still smiling, but his smile did not reach his eyes. His eyes were cloudy and lifeless. Smiling was just a habit that he had formed for the sake of living. Seeing Lu Zheng's heavy heart, Ma Xiao thought for a while and said, I'll think of another one later. Oil orange was just a nickname he had given her, but she couldn't bear such a nickname in the future. Lu Zheng said, Yes, I'll give you one. If you don't, I'll decide when I adopt her in the future. Ma Xiao smiled faintly and said nothing. Lu Zheng was also a top student in Langyi Academy. It was the child's fortune to have a name with his talent. The two of them were silent for a long time. Just as Lu Zheng was about to suspect that Ma Xiao had fallen asleep, the latter suddenly talked about the past. I've been dreaming about my youth these days. Besides you and Lanting, how's Buku and Ben? Ma Xiao hadn't mentioned these names for many years. Talking about them after so many years, he found them so familiar. Buku referred to Fangji and Ben referred to Jiang Emo. Buku used to be in Nanchang. Later, he couldn't live in seclusion anymore, so he went north to Wanzhou to find Master Yuanjing. He found a teaching job at the Golden Scale Academy. Now his days are pretty leisurely. Lu Zheng spoke of his old friend's current situation and sighed. Actually, perhaps you don't know this, but the Lord supports the poor, so he has some discord with the aristocratic families. It's just that these discord haven't been brought to the surface. I was born into a landowning household, so I could still do whatever I wanted in the early years. However, my parents would eventually grow old, and the burden of the family still fell on me. In the end, we still drifted apart. On one side was his childhood friend, and on the other side was his family's stubborn and conservative stance. Jiang Emo didn't have the ability to stake everything on one throw. After so many years, Jiang Emo had also changed from a Chinibyu who only loved 2D paper dolls to a shrewd clan leader. A few months ago, Lu Zheng had gone to congratulate Jiang Mo's eldest grandson on his 1-month-old birthday. Jiang Emo was so happy that he drank too much. When he was drunk, he hugged Lu Zheng to suppress his sobs and complained about his troubles. He wanted to stay in his teens forever, so that he wouldn't have to bear the pressure of his family and the outside world. He also didn't have to go against his will to do things that he didn't like, and he didn't have to become the kind of person he hated the most when he was young. Lu Zheng didn't know how to comfort him. When he woke up the next day, Jiang Emo acted as if nothing had happened. It was as if he couldn't remember what he had said when he was drunk. Xiaoyin, do you think Lu Lanting will kill me if I cross her bottom line? Lu Zheng thought about it seriously and answered. If she still has some feelings for me, she will do it herself. Jiang Emo laughed and cried at the same time. After a long time he waved his hand and said tiredly, "You're right. I just hope that day doesn't come." Lu Zheng stopped thinking, but his heart was still heavy. At this moment he heard Ma Xiao say, "So among the 5 of us only Lanting hasn't changed." Lu Zheng said, "A person with a strong heart is not easily swayed by external factors. If she didn't have such a strong heart, she wouldn't have reached her current position." Ma Xiao had a long dream that night, not knowing if it was because what he thought about during the day would lead to his dreams at night. This was also the most peaceful sleep he had in years. He dreamt of Langia County's green mountains and clear waters. Jiang Emo, who still had some baby fat on his face, was fishing by a stream. The scorching sun above his head made him listless, and Fang Ji was yawning beside him. Lu Zheng and Fang Ji were discussing how to make the fire burn brighter. At this moment, Jiang Emo complained. "Why is Lanting in the future? The fish that we caught are starving." Ma Xiao laughed. "He's still young and likes to sleep in. Didn't you slack off when you were his age?" Jiang Mo's face turned red with anger. "How can I slack off until late in the morning?" As they spoke, they heard the sound of hooves approaching from the other side of the river. A figure in red and white rushed out of the dense forest on the other side of the river. Lu Shi was dressed in a red robe, riding on the back of a tall white horse. He urged the white horse to leap across the narrow stream, and landed not far from them. Jiang Emo was startled by the movement. The fish that had bitten the bait had escaped, and he angrily threw his fishing rod into the river. "Lu Lanting." "Nay." Lu Shi grabbed the reins and steadied the white horse. He then jumped off the horse and grabbed a few rabbits that were hanging on its back. "Do you think that you can compensate me for my fish just because you hunted a few small animals?" Lu Shi crossed his arms in front of his chest. "It's a toy that Mr. X keeps in his backyard. I stole it." That bastard seemed to be the one who had embarrassed Jiang Emo a few days ago. He said that Jiang Emo was obsessed with the fire-repelling painting, and did not know the beauty of a real person. If Lu Shi found out that he had stolen the rabbits that he had been raising for a long time, he would be so angry that he would cry. Jiang Emo laughed when he heard this, but the others frowned. No matter how much he hated Lu Shi, he could not steal. If he acted recklessly now, he would get into big trouble in the future. After being lectured by Lu Zheng, Fang Ji, and Ma Xiao, Lu Shi could only admit that she had hunted the rabbits. "If you hunted them, why did you say that you stole them?" Lu Shi smiled maliciously. "I was just trying to make you happy." Jiang Emo was infuriated. "Lu Shi." Next was the barbecue. None of them were good at barbecuing, but Jiang Emo had to swallow his own. When Lu Shi was not paying attention, Jiang Emo pushed him into the water. He ended up getting himself drenched in the water. "You're the bane of me." Lu Shi laughed. "Not only am I the bane of you now, but I'll make sure that you won't be able to make a comeback in the future." Jiang Emo gritted his teeth in anger. "Remember this when you enter the imperial court in the future." "I will. I won't forget it even if I die." Ma Xiao could only play the peacemaker and persuade the two of them to stop fighting. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" Ma Xiao slowly opened his eyes when he heard his granddaughter's voice. He was stunned when he saw the beams on the roof. "What time is it now?" Ma Xiao had not slept so soundly in a long time. When he woke up, he did not know what time it was. His granddaughter said, "It's time for lunch. It's already late in the morning." Chapter 18:20. The weather in Beiyuan is too cold. It's only the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. The capital city of Beiyuan has been covered in snow for 2 months. The snow in Shui City has reached its ankles. Although our soldiers are not afraid of the cold and heat, the weather is bad and it's not suitable to fight. I think since the aristocrats of Beiyuan have created such good psychological conditions for us, why not use this as a breakthrough? Now Beiyuan is a dam in danger. We only need to find their weakest point and give them a fatal blow. Even if we don't do anything, they will collapse on their own. The first step was to attack conspiracies, then to attack friends, then to attack soldiers, and finally to attack the city. If they could conquer Beiyuan with the least loss of public opinion, why would Jiang Pingji let the soldiers take the risk and send troops? The weather conditions in Beiyuan were too bad. Even if the soldiers of Beiyuan were vulnerable, they had lived here all year round and were far more adaptable to the climate than them. Jiang Pingji was fighting in an away game. Of course, she was at a disadvantage in terms of water and soil. If the soldiers caused a widespread epidemic because of physical discomfort, it would give the enemy a chance to fight back. Not to mention whether the enemy could seize the opportunity. Jiang Pingji should not have made such a fatal mistake. Qi Guanrang said. My lord and I have the same idea, but, Jiang Pingji asked. But what? Qi Guanrang made a gesture of apology. Before Jiang Pingji arrived, he was too ruthless in dealing with the refugees of Beiyuan. If Beiyuan used this to bewitch the people and make them want to fight to the death, even if the possibility was small, it was Qi Guanrang who gave the enemy something to use against him. Jiang Pingji exempted him from apologizing. How can you be blamed for this? You did nothing wrong. If it were me, I wouldn't have done it better than you. Qi Guanrang did not kill all the refugees as soon as he arrived. The refugees who committed the crime for the first time were all given dry food and persuaded. If this was considered ruthless, what else could Jiang Pingji say? She said, Wenzheng, why don't you listen to my plan? Qi Guanrang listened attentively and said respectfully, My lord, please speak. Jiang Pingji tapped her finger on the table. Last night, I sent someone to ask the people of Beiyuan who fled with Jiqing. Most of them had the impression of war, death, plague, and barrenness about Dongqing and the other 3 countries. They were extremely certain. Ma Xiu was not fooled. He was also one of the few people who believed that the situation in Dongqing was stable, but he was not sure to what extent. Qi Guanrang said, This is exactly what I want to tell you, my lord. In order to prevent the people from escaping through the border, Beiyuan not only strictly guards the border and cruelly kills the people who try to escape, but also sends people to fool the people from time to time and publicize some groundless human tragedies. Jiang Pingji sneered. For example, I killed a lot of people, exploited and oppressed the people, and made the land barren and full of bones? Qi Guanrang said helplessly. The words that they spread are much harsher than the Lord's. They also fabricate more false content. Killing people was still considered polite. Cannibalism, eating children, bathing in women's blood to maintain beauty, kidnapping pregnant women to perform a C-section for fun, and having 3,000 beautiful men and 3,000 beautiful women, with no taboo between men and women, engaging in open-air nude debauchery, all in all, it seemed that his lord wanted a copy of everything that King Zhou, who had been slandered like a dog, had done in the investiture of the gods. Not only did she have to copy, but she also had to come up with new ideas, and new ideas had to be innovated. In short, she had to be as slandered as possible. Qi Guanrang deeply suspected that the people in Beiyuan who were engaged in the internet water army were fans of the investiture of the gods. While they eagerly followed the story of Wanzhou, they racked their brains to frame their lord, saying that the world was a big melting pot. Only in this way would the people know fear, and continue to endure the hellish days on earth. Look, the world outside Beiyuan was like that. You would regret it if you went there. It was better to stay in Beiyuan. Although Beiyuan couldn't let you eat your fill, it could let you drag out an ignoble existence. As one of the targets of slander, Qi Guanrang only wanted to smash the heads of these idiots. How could they slander his lord? When Qi Guanrang first saw this information, he had secretly thought about capturing them in the future and cutting off their dog paws with a knife. That's all they can do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tormented Beiyuan like this. Jiang Pingji sneered. They say that I'm muddle-headed, tyrannical, and repulsive, but there are still people who can't bear it and take the risk to flee. It shows how much they've gone overboard. Qi Guanrang gently waved his feather fan and smiled. His thoughts were the same as his lord's. Another official asked, My lord, do you want the people of Beiyuan to know the real Dongqing? Jiang Pingji said, If we don't let them know how good the people of Dongqing are living, how will they know that they've been fooled? The more the aristocrats of Beiyuan squeezed the people, the stronger the backlash. But if the people flee here one after another, should we accept them or not? Whether they accept them or not, it didn't seem right. Jiang Pingji said matter-of-factly. No. Why should we accept them? Is it fun to move these days? Or is it not troublesome to move across borders? We're not going to guide the people of Beiyuan to seek refuge in Dongqing, nor are we going to drag their families away from their homeland. We want to let them know that even if Beiyuan changes its master, they can still live as well as the people of Dongqing. We also want them to know that their lives are even worse than the people who wander from place to place in troubled times. By the way, we should send someone to bribe the general who guards the border. It should work. The general who guards the border? Bribe that person? That general has a very good reputation among the martial artists. I'm afraid it won't be easy to persuade him. Although bribing the enemy general was normal, it also depended on the situation. If they met a loyal general, bribing him would only bring disgrace upon themselves. If they were unlucky, they might even fall into the enemy's trap. Jiang Pingji sneered. If he's really capable, how can he not even keep an eye on a group of refugees? I originally thought that person was greedy and lazy. He didn't care about these refugees, and was too lazy to carry out the order issued by the royal family of Beiyuan, to kill the people who fled. Now that I look at it, it's not entirely true. Perhaps this general still has some conscience, so he turned a blind eye to it and gave the refugees a way out. If it was greed and dereliction of duty, it could be bribed with money. By then, if the public opinion fermented well, Jiang Pingji could collude with the general to open the door and create the halo of a king's teacher. If it was someone with a conscience that had not been extinguished, then it would be even better. He would be moved by emotion and reason, and he would be moved by the righteousness of the world. Then he would be tempted by benefits, and he would not have any worries after he sought refuge with them. This would also achieve the best effect. Of course, if the general was unmoved by force or persuasion, Jiang Pingji could only use force to attack. Who gave the old, weak, and disabled soldiers of Beiyuan the courage to think that they could guard this stupid pass? I don't deny that there is eternal loyalty in this world, but it's just the tip of a phoenix's feather. Chapter 1821. When the officials retreated, they went about their own business. Qi Guanrang waved his feather fan and complained to Jiang Pingji. My lord, you shouldn't have said such things to them. It will make you seem suspicious and heartless. It will be written about in the history books in the future. For the officials, if the ruler did not trust them from the bottom of his heart, would there be any sense of security? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Wenzheng, do you think I said something wrong? Qi Guanrang said seriously, My lord, what you said is reasonable, but there are too many people in the world who like to deceive themselves and refuse to face themselves. Until the critical moment, everyone felt that they were the most loyal and should be rewarded for their loyalty. When Qi Guanrang was studying in the early years, he discovered that many so-called famous officials did not have much ability, for example, the court officials of Dongqing in the past, but they used their loyalty to the ruler in exchange for positions that were unworthy of their abilities. They even brainwashed themselves and swore that they were extremely loyal to the ruler. In the end, when Dongqing collapsed, these people were the fastest to change their allegiance. The flags that were raised back then were slapped in the face at that moment, but these people did not feel any pain. That was amazing. What was even more amazing was that his lord snorted at their words and actions. She only stopped short of pointing at their noses and telling them not to do this. How capable you are is how important your job is. Swearing loyalty to her will not even get you a single grain of rice. Then let them read. Will I lose a piece of meat? Regardless of whether he was heartless or hypocritical, he spoke as if she could hear what these people were saying. A person who has the brains to say such ridiculous things, not to mention the people of the future, even if he is in the present, he doesn't have the right to stand in front of me and say such things to me. So, why should I care about how they bark at me? Qi Guanrang was silent for 3 breaths. He suddenly laughed and waved the feather fan in his hand even more cheerfully. What attracted him the most about Jiang Pingji? Not only were their minds connected, But it was also the arrogance and confidence that had not changed since they were young. To Qiguanrang, it was far more attractive than a drug pin to a drug addict. Wenjing, let's discuss something. Jiang Pingji faintly looked at the fan in his hand and extended 4 fingers, indicating that Qiguanrang should recognize that he was a man in his 40s. His body was not as strong as when he was young. Could he not hold his precious fan on a snowy day? It was fine to hold the fan, but could he not fan here and there? After so many years, did Qiguanrang not realize that no one liked to play with him in winter? Qiguanrang's smile slowly disappeared. In the streaming room, Qiguanrang Jiang Pingji. His head could be broken and he would bleed. Jiang Pingji was not. Well, as he said Jiang Pingji, he would be. Jiang Zhou Jiang with the guard. As. With he. And Jiang was. I. Jiang Rang, Jiang. Jiang Shui. And. Jiang, said of. And said. Jiang of the Jiang, even a Jiang even. Could. Even though. When the garrison general asked, the messenger sent by Jiang Pingji hurriedly explained that it was because the refugees from Beiyuan had caused the people at the border of Dongqing to suffer unspeakably. That was why the current situation was created. He did not have the slightest intention of destroying the friendship between the two countries. He just wanted to seek justice for the victims. Underscore this level of lying was probably equivalent to pointing out that laundry detergent was a chemical weapon. If they really wanted to seek justice, why would they need to deploy 250,000 soldiers to poke at their doorstep? Of course, the defending general did not dare to answer the messenger's question directly. He did not even acknowledge that the refugees were the people of the North Abyss. The citizens of our Beiyuan kingdom are generous and righteous. How could we commit such evil acts as burning, killing, looting, and raping the citizens of our neighboring country? Even if he really smuggled in illegally, he would still be an honest person who knew his place. The messenger used this as a breakthrough point and started chatting. For example, I heard that the taxes in Beiyuan are very heavy. How much taxes do the people pay every year? Are they still living well after paying so much taxes? Do they have enough to eat and wear? Is the place they live in leaky? I heard from the refugees that the situation in Beiyuan is not very good. Do they need help from the neighboring country? Everyone is doing this for the sake of the people. Don't stand on ceremony. The garrison general's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. At first, he could still handle it. Later, he felt that the messenger knew too much. However, he was the messenger sent by Jiang Pingji. No matter how bad his mouth was, he could not simply kill him. After chatting about this, the messenger began to care about the garrison general's family situation. Questions such as, which family does old Tai come from? Oh, so he was born from a commoner's grassroots background. Old Tai is awesome. It's not easy to start from scratch these days. How many people are there in his family? Where are his uncle, aunt, sister-in-law, nephew, and niece now? Old Tai is fighting a war alone. Does he miss them? How's the salary? Is it enough for the family's expenses? If it's not enough, why not consider jumping ship and finding a better job? The garrison general's face turned green as he listened. It just so happened that the messenger was testing him while stepping on his bottom line. He could not explode even if he wanted to. Most importantly, when the garrison general was perfunctorily dealing with the messenger, he revealed a lot of personal information. The messenger had obviously done his homework. He knew that the garrison general had started from scratch and was being oppressed by his superiors who were born from aristocratic families. He knew how much credit had been stolen from him. He even knew that his wife had been ridiculed by other noblewomen in some public places. He knew about the grievances he had suffered all these years. How could he quickly close the relationship between the two of them? Of course, it was to accompany him in ridiculing the gossip of the people he hated and be his intimate trash can. Although the garrison general did not complain to the messenger, he was shaken by the words. At this time, the messenger did not propose to engage in a shady transaction. Instead, he mentioned a successful example that was similar to the garrison general's starting point. Look at the military generals under Lord Zhang's banner. Some were born from aristocratic families of generals, but most of them were born into commoners. They were not suppressed and their military achievements were taken away. Seeing that the garrison general did not believe him, the messenger pretended to be surprised and mentioned some rumors he had heard. I heard that my lord's reputation in Beiyuan is mostly untrue and false. Have you heard of it, General? The garrison general was shocked. He broke out in a cold sweat and smiled. How could that be? Where did the messenger hear these words? If he directly confirmed the truth of Beiyuan discrediting Jiangpingji, and admitted that they were the ones who stirred up those messy rumors, Jiangpingji would directly carry the flag and attack them. What attacking without a good reason? Fighting to defend one's dignity? That was sufficient reason enough. Looking at the history of the predecessors, there was no lack of humiliating the monarch of a country, which then led to the destruction of the country. Even if the two countries were bound to fight, the garrison general could not let the information be used against them. The garrison general flatly rejected the idea. The messenger sneered again and again. After 3 rounds of wine, the messenger said that he had something to say to the garrison general. He hoped that the garrison general could dismiss his attendance. The garrison general had a guilty conscience. After hesitating for a while, he agreed. The messenger took the opportunity to extend an olive branch and promised many generous conditions. The garrison general absolutely refused. Chapter 1822. The envoy did not get angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "General, you are wrong. A fine bird chooses a tree to rest in, and a virtuous minister chooses a master to serve. Is the current royal family of Beiyuan really the legitimate one? It was merely a vile person who used bloody and despicable means to snatch it. At the end of the day, it was not justifiable. If that was the case, how could they bear the general's loyalty? Worthy of the general's unwavering loyalty. Dare I ask the general, are you loyal to the regicide and usurping Yi family, or to the people of Beiyuan? The Yi family usurped the throne. They should have been executed." The general was distraught, but he had to admit that the messenger was right. "General." The emissary struck while the iron was hot. "The Yi family is in power, and they conferred titles of nobility. Their entire family ate up the national treasury until there was nothing left. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are the biggest rats in the country." In order to satisfy his own selfish desires, he increased taxes and oppressed the common people, causing the wilderness to stretch for thousands of miles, bones piled up, and the road to the Yellow Springs was completely blocked. These crimes, dare I ask all the civil and military officials in the imperial court, who doesn't know about them? "General, if you can overthrow the tyranny of the Yi clan with the help of my lord's power, you will be avenging the wrongful death of the late lord and upholding justice for the hundreds of millions of people in the North Abyss." The defending general really believed it, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. Master Yi was indeed a sycophant who usurped the throne. All these years, the people of Beiyuan had no way to live. This was also an indisputable fact. The envoy said with a smile, "I heard that there are still some descendants of the former royal family of the Beiyuan living in exile outside?" The general glared at him and berated, "Who said that?" The messenger was not afraid of the general's threat at all. Instead, he said calmly, "Whether this rumor is true or not, it has left a trace of bloodline for the former royal family of the Beiyuan. If the Yi clan knew about this, they would definitely be anxious, and they would wish for nothing more than to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, so as to put an end to any future troubles, right? Has the general ever thought that if you can find these descendants and help them to be conferred the title of nobility in the future, wouldn't that prove your loyalty?" The defending general was a little uncertain. Because of the abnormal customs of the Beiyuan, it was not a shameful thing for men to leave seeds everywhere and have children. Who knew if the men of the Beiyuan royal family had left seeds after a night of romance? The Yi clan claimed that the entire Beiyuan royal family had been killed, but was that even possible? Was it impossible for someone to slip through the net? Putting everything else aside, the landowning gentry who had created the world record and had hundreds of daughters and sons was still the subject of much discussion. For the sake of power, the landowning gentry desperately gave birth to children. When their children grew up, they would enter the imperial court and fight for the right to speak. Was the imperial family going to keep themselves clean? Most importantly, the emissary said this in front of him, so it was most likely that the descendant of the royal family was in their hands. The envoy did not look at the military general's changing expression and calmly persuaded. All the civil and military officials in the Beiyuan imperial court know that Master Yi is a villain who usurped the throne and a sinner who subverted the universe. But why doesn't anyone say anything? Why does everyone pretend to be deaf and mute? Wasn't it because they were afraid of death? Wasn't it because they were vile people who fawned on the rich and powerful? Wasn't it all because they were afraid of getting into trouble and being accused of treason by the Yi clan? However, the general was different. The general was a truly loyal and valiant general. Why would he be afraid of such things? If you take the right path, when the political situation in Beiyuan is clear and the people live and work in peace, it will be clear who the people should praise and who they should criticize. The general seemed to have been injected with chicken blood by the envoy's words. The latter said, "Who is truly loyal to the emperor and thinks for the sake of the country and the common people? Does the general know?" "It's you, the general." Listening to the messenger spout nonsense with a straight face, the balance in the commander's heart tilted towards Jiang Pingji with a thud. After a long time, the general bowed to the envoy and said with a firm gaze, "Please teach me how to eradicate the villains of the Yi clan." The envoy laughed heartily and helped the general, whose eyes were glistening with tears. With such a loyal person like the general in Beiyuan, why worry about the torch not being passed on? Next, it was time for the envoy to sell his lord in Dongqing and Wanzhou to the general. Listening to the envoy's description of the prosperous times, the general looked as if he had been deceived. He cursed the Yi clan for being treacherous and scoundrels. The envoy asked in surprise, "Why is the general so angry?" The defending general sighed and shook his head. The bastards of the Yi clan really spared no effort in defaming Jiang Pingji. Even the general was dubious. The envoy's face was solemn, but he was already sharpening his knife in his heart. When these little bastards of the Yi clan broke through the royal city of Beiyuan, he would capture them one by one and chop off their hands. The general entertained the envoy well, settled him in the best courtyard, and sent the most beautiful women to sleep with him. The envoy smiled and refused. "I have a fierce wife at home, I dare not enjoy it." The general was shocked. What was wrong with a man sleeping with a woman? Besides, it wasn't as if the envoy was going to sleep with her and bring her back. It was just something to relieve himself. Was the envoy so afraid? The envoy sighed. Has the general forgotten whether my lord is a man or a woman? As a subject, I should at least follow the thoughts of the lord. The general understood, and could only remove the women serving him. That night, the envoy ordered the guards he brought to keep watch and inform him to escape if there was any movement. The guard said, "Counselor, did you convince that person?" Fengzhen clicked his tongue and rolled his eyes. "Who knows if he's just playing along with me? Maybe he'll come to kill me in the middle of the night?" He had obviously underestimated the power of his verbal rap, and overestimated the upper limit of the general. The night passed peacefully. Fengzhen even dreamed that Wuxia, or gave him an encouraging kiss, and the two of them were in a frenzy. He didn't have an affair outside, and he still knew how to keep his chastity. Not bad, not bad. After waking up, Fengzhen muttered as he put on his clothes. Of course, can Xiaoer's color be compared to any ordinary rouge or powder? He was as pure as ice and clean as jade. Could any woman touch him? What a joke. After dealing with the general and confirming that they could flirt, Fengzhen's mission was considered complete. He left contentedly. When Jiang Pingji saw Feng Longzi, who was flushed with success, she looked him up and down with a faint smile. Fengzhen couldn't help but shiver. His hairs were standing on end from his lord's stare. Does my lord feel that something is wrong? Jiang Pingji smiled. No, everything is right. Fengzhen couldn't help but mutter to himself. If there was nothing wrong, why was she staring at him like that? Qiguan Rang asked, "Is that general reliable?" Fengzhen said, "Whether he's reliable or not, it's fine as long as he's useful. If he only relies on his brain, he won't have much success in the future." Boorish people deserve to be tricked into his trap. Fengzhen was probably a scumbag. Yesterday he was still sweet-talking the general. His mouth seemed to be smeared with honey. He had just settled the general, and now he was pulling up his pants and ignoring him. Would the general be heartbroken if he knew? Sob, sob, sob. Confucius once said, "I'd rather believe in ghosts in the world than believe in a strategist's lousy mouth." The reason the general was tricked was probably because he was too uneducated. Smiley face. Angle. After a few days, Feng Zhen and the general secretly communicated and put the prepared public opinion proposal on the market. With the general's help to add fuel to the fire, the effect was really great. Chapter 1823. Enia porridge. Compared to the turbulence at the front line, the days at the rear defense line were much more leisurely. The two princes were also thriving like bamboo shoots after the rain. For example, the eldest prince was more proficient in speaking and had a tendency to be a chatterbox, while the second prince was still a man of few words and was as steady as Mount Tai. Scare him early. The eldest prince had ideas since he was young, especially after realizing that his status was extraordinary. He did things more and more like a model. The second prince lazily raised his eyelids and turned around to face the eldest prince. She didn't want to mess around with the Jiang family's little brat. This brat was obsessed with appearances, but she wasn't, and she had no interest in Wuxia. Ni. The eldest prince pushed his sister's shoulder and shouted coquettishly, "Ni, go scare him early." The second prince was speechless. Speaking of which, why did a 1-year-old child know how to act cute? Didn't she know that it was against the rules? The female official on the side smiled and echoed, "The eldest prince likes Mr. Wei very much." The eldest prince grinned, revealing a few small white teeth, and said, "Scare him very well." As someone obsessed with appearances, the eldest prince had never hidden this from a young age. Her closest maids and servants were all good-looking. The female official said, "Mr. Wei will come to teach in an hour. Your Highness, you will see him in a little while." The eldest prince didn't quite understand the meaning of the whole sentence, but she could understand the second half, so she obediently sat and waited. The female official saw that the two princes were so cooperative that she wanted to get married and have children. Smiley face. Angle. The colleague heard her thoughts and couldn't help but roll his eyes to discourage her. How can an ordinary child compare to the two princes? What is their background, and what is our prince's background? How can it be the same? The colleague said, "What is an ordinary 1-year-old child like? It's already good enough that they can call out their parents. How can they express themselves like a 2-year-old child like the eldest prince? Most of them are still drinking milk at 5 or 6 years old, but the two princes are extraordinary since they were in their mother's womb. Think about it. Has anyone ever worried about His Highness since he was born? As expected of the reincarnation of Ziwei Star, he was born extraordinary. Her Highness Lian had been intelligent for a long time, while Her Highness Yin had been too lazy to discern her aptitude, but it wasn't too bad. Giving birth to a child was not easy, but to give birth to a child with the same aptitude as the two princes was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Her colleague's words successfully dispelled the female official's thoughts. When Wei Xi came to teach on time, the eldest prince ran towards him like a cannonball and hugged his thigh tightly. "Wow, I want a hug." Wei Xi hurriedly bent down to steady her so that she wouldn't fall. Then he bowed respectfully. "Your subject Wei Xi greets your First Highness." While Wei Xi was bowing, the first prince grinned and leaned forward to plant a wet kiss on his cheek. "If you want to scare me, give me a hug." His Royal Highness couldn't help curling his lips when he saw this. Her outgoing personality really took after her mother. At such a young age, she had already learned to flirt without a teacher. What would happen when she grew up? If Jiang was fighting at the front line? Ji wondered if she would sneeze if she knew that her daughter had made a move on her husband. "Princess Lian, you mustn't do this in the future." Wei Xi was momentarily stunned. He patiently advised Her Highness to pay attention to her image. It was time to change her bad habit of being obsessed with looks. "Do you want to scare me?" She had been bored the whole day. The courtyard was only so big. She got bored after walking a few rounds. Her younger sister didn't play with her, So the thing she looked forward to the most every day was seeing Wuxia. It wasn't just because Wuxia was good-looking, but also because they were naturally close by blood. Wuxia rarely overstepped his authority. He raised his hand to stroke the eldest prince's soft hair and chuckled. "I miss your highness very much too." Not far away, there were female officials and servants standing guard. Wuxia couldn't be too intimate with her. He pacified the little one and began to prepare for the lesson. Her Highness Lian's talent was similar to Her Highness Jiang Yan's in his previous life. Not only did she speak early and learn early, but she also had a strong memory. Wuxia had experienced it once, so when he taught the twins, his teaching speed wasn't slow. They didn't need to understand the meaning of these books now. They only needed to memorize them. When they were older, it would be much easier to formally enlighten them. As usual, the eldest prince didn't last until the end. When Wuxia finished, she was so sleepy that she curled up into a ball. Her saliva wet the mat. He carried the two children back to the room and asked the female official what she had done and said today. In the end, Wuxia also asked, "Did anyone come to see the two princes today?" The female official was quite puzzled. Ever since Lord Jiang left for the war, Wuxia had asked this question every afternoon. Who would look for the two princes when Lord Jiang wasn't around? The two princes were too young. They couldn't even speak or walk properly. What was the use of looking for them? She had these doubts in her heart, but the female official didn't show it. Instead, she replied as usual, "No." Today, driven by curiosity, she asked another question. "Is Mr. Wei worried about the two princes' safety?" Wuxia smiled and said, "The two princes' sleeping quarters are tightly guarded. Who could sneak past the guards and hurt the princes? It's just that the two princes are still young. They need to be more thorough in all aspects and can't slack off. Therefore, I have no other intention in asking this question." The female official's doubts disappeared. The two thought that they had spoken very softly, but they didn't know that the second prince in the room heard every word. As expected, Wuxia wasn't completely clueless. It was just that some things couldn't be avoided with strict precautions. Even if he tightly guarded the sleeping quarters, it would still be easy for the bad guy to come in and take away the two babies. The bad guy's purpose was not just to deal with the two babies. After Wuxia left, he met Suke. Suke had been busier recently. With the war in Beiyuan and Xichang, he had to worry about the logistics and food supplies. He had lost 2 sizes at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although there were others to share the work, Suke was the head butler of the Ji family. He knew the situation of the food supplies very well. Some important things had to be done by him. Outsiders would only add to the trouble if they tried to help. In this way, he had lost weight. After returning to the mansion, the servants told him that Cheng Jing was waiting for him. Master's wife fried some melon seeds and dried a few caddies of dried fruits. Considering that there was no one to take care of you in the mansion, she sent me to deliver some to you. The melon seeds fried by Master's wife were delicious. Back then Jiang, Ji and Lu Zheng stole a lot of them. Cheng Jing and the others weren't greedy for good food, but they didn't dare to refuse Master's wife's kindness. No matter how small the snacks were, they were still her kind intentions. They didn't dare to refuse the elders' gifts. Cheng Jing was a man of meticulous observation. Seeing that Wuxi's eyebrows were a little worried, he asked casually. Wuxi hesitated for a moment. "Yumo, if you are loyal to someone, but that person doesn't give you a chance to make a name for yourself, will you blame him?" Cheng Jing chewed the melon seeds and guessed correctly. Chapter 1824. Wuxi was stunned when he heard the 2 words Suku from Cheng Jing's mouth. His expression was one of astonishment. "Senior brother, why?" Wuxi rarely used the form of address he used when he was younger. Cheng Jing was older than Wuxi and had taken good care of him when he was studying. Wuxi used to call him senior brother. However, as they grew up, the close relationship between fellow disciples turned into a friendship between gentlemen, and they began to address each other by their proper names. Cheng Jing asked Wuxi in return, "You think it's hard to guess? Or do you want to know why I guessed that the person you mentioned was Suke?" "Zixiao, Don't you think that among all the officials under Lord Jiang's banner, only Suku stands out from the rest? He's more special than Qiguanrang. Wuxia was silent for a while. Senior brother, can you tell me, what's so special about him? Cheng Jing got up and looked around. After confirming that there were no outsiders, he cautiously sat back down. Among the important officials under Lord Jiang's banner, there are 3 who have the lowest status, Zixiao. I am not looking down on their backgrounds, but this is an undeniable fact. Yang Si, Qiguanrang and Su Ke. Among the 3 of them, Yang Si can be considered the master's adopted son. His studies and enlightenment were all taken care of by the master. But it is an indisputable fact that his mother came from a prostitute's family. Not to mention Qiguanrang, he was born from a girl at the border of Dongqing forced by the horse bandits of the northern borderline. He was of mixed blood and was not recognized by the 2 tribes. His birth was equally disgraceful and had been criticized for many years. What Cheng Jing said was the truth. It was also what Yang Si and Qiguanrang hated the most when people mentioned it. The 3rd person, Suku. Cheng Jing paused at the mention of Suku. Compared to Yang Si and Qiguanrang, Suku's presence was almost non-existent. He would only occasionally attract the attention of the outside world. Suku offended the aristocrats when he was young. Even though he killed them out of filial piety, this cannot hide the fact that he was branded and exiled. Even though he was released from his lowly status by Lord Jiang and returned to a respectable status, the obvious tattoos on his face could not be concealed. Anyone who has seen him would know what kind of background he has. After saying so much, Cheng Jing was a little thirsty. He poured himself a cup of tea to moisten his throat. In terms of status, the 3 of them are equally matched. Wuxia said, "My lord has never been particular about one's family background, only about one's ability and moral character." Cheng Jing nodded in agreement. That's right. After so many years of observation, she has indeed implemented this very well. She has never shown any favoritism. But here comes the question. Has Lord Jiang really not been biased in these past few years? Zixiao, ask yourself honestly. If this question was asked to you, you wouldn't be able to answer it either, right? Had Lord Jiang ever shown favoritism? To Su Ke, she's probably the most biased person. Wuxi's face turned cold after hearing this. He pursed his lips and did not answer. Cheng Jing said, Su Ke, Qiguanrang and Yang Si. Other than Yang Si, the other 2 were acquainted with Lord Jiang when he was young. There was no need to mention Su Ke. Not only was he the first person to meet Jiang Jun, he was also Jiang Jun's study attendant when he was young, a steward who had been entrusted with heavy responsibilities. If Lord Jiang was just an ordinary nobleman, Su Ke wouldn't have mistreated him if he had been her housekeeper and accountant. But Lord Jiang is not an ordinary aristocratic son. She has walked from humble beginnings to where she is today. She is only 1 step away from ascending the throne, and she will become the future emperor of the world. All these years, Cheng Jing had been observing the world from the perspective of a bystander. At the same time, he had also observed Jiangsu, Ji and the other officials. After observing for a while, he found Su Ke to be an anomaly. In terms of friendship, no one could compare to him in Jiang, Ji's childhood friendship. In terms of talent, Su Ke could not be compared to Jiang Qinghu. Ji Yi had been taking care of the rear for so many years, and had put in a lot of hard work. In terms of reputation, he was at the bottom of the list of important ministers. Ever since Yang Si followed Lord Jiang, he has been participating in every battle and rarely had the chance to oversee the rear. When Lord Jiang had yet to prosper, she had handed over the extremely important Hu County to Yang Si, ordering him to train the troops and take charge of all affairs in Hu County. After that, he gave him the authority to deal with the Su brothers. After that, Yang Si's official career was even smoother, and he had many military achievements. Relying on these military achievements, who would dare to be presumptuous and despise his background in front of Yang Si? Not to mention Qiguanrang. His glorious battle record is even better than Yang Si's. The battle at Zhongzhou was truly brilliant. Not only did he have meritorious service to back him up, he also had Lord Zhang's complete trust. Now, is there anyone who dares to speak ill of his family background to his face? Cheng Jing's words made sense. If one looked carefully, one would find Jiang Su. The Empress Dowager Ji treats her officials who were born poor and commoners really well. It was not that he was biased towards them, nor was it that he could not distinguish right from wrong. Ji Yunshu was the fairest vassal Cheng Jing had ever seen. But did this mean that she was not biased? Of course not. She was biased because she would give these people a chance to make contributions, and let them speak with facts. As long as they performed meritorious deeds, any reward would not be excessive. With meritorious service and rewards, their status and weight would rise accordingly. In comparison, the officials of landowning households were slightly weaker. Of course, if one didn't look closely, one wouldn't be able to notice it. Even if they found out, Yang Si and the others also spoke with their strength, and did not rely on nepotism to get to the top, so there was nothing to criticize. Whether it was the civil officials or the military generals, almost all of them were like that. Among the generals Li, Fu Wang Dianyan, Jiang Nongqin Meng Han. These people did not come from noble families, but they had many opportunities to lead troops and lead battles. They were strong themselves, so it was not difficult for them to accumulate military merits. Of course, this also had to do with Jiang Su. It was because there were too few generals in Ji Ye's tent. Even if he absorbed Yang Tao's former subordinates in the later stages of the game, there weren't many battles left. He still couldn't surpass these few in terms of reputation. Everyone was like that, except for Su Ke. It would be hard for Cheng Jing not to notice him since he was so conspicuous. Su Ke and Mr. Jiang have known each other since they were young. Not only do they have a master-servant relationship, but they also share a youthful friendship. Logically speaking, Su Ke should have won the emperor's favor the most. Cheng Jing deliberately used the word, emperor's favor. It was a fact that Ji Yi would ascend to the top in the future. Yet, the status he possessed did not match his reputation. It could be said that he had lost the emperor's favor and trust, but Mr. Jiang had handed over all the matters of the rear to him, almost betting his life on it. Who would dare to say that this was not trust? But to say that she trusted Su Ke, that was not entirely true. No matter how good Su Ke was at internal affairs, he was not only good at managing internal affairs, but he knew nothing about military affairs. He seemed to have never touched military power even once. If one were to say that he was good at it, Wuxia was also good at internal affairs, but he followed the army year after year, running to this battlefield or that battlefield. While he controlled military power, it did not hinder him from managing government affairs. It was almost like he was doing both at the same time. As for Su Ke, Chapter 1825. Cheng Jing was sometimes confused. He didn't know what Jiang Pingji was thinking. Su Ke didn't lack status or merit. He only lacked a reputation that could intimidate others. Just like what Wei Xi asked earlier. Su Ke had always been loyal to Jiang Pingji, but she didn't let him go to the front line to make a name for himself. Would he be resentful? If it were Cheng Jing, he would be resentful. However, I don't think Su Ke resents this. So, the relationship between Jiang Pingji and Su Ke was very mysterious. As an outsider, Cheng Jing couldn't comment. Wei Xi hesitated and couldn't help but whisper. But I think that with Su Ke's temperament, he won't be content with the rear. Even if he doesn't resent me, he should be dissatisfied. This is human nature. The experience in his previous life also proved this point. Su Ke was determined to repay his former lord for her kindness. No matter how well Her Majesty treated him later, Su Ke still secretly plotted a rebellion. He trapped Her Majesty in the steep mountains and forced her into a desperate situation. Even when the generals reacted and went to rescue her, they all thought that Her Majesty was dead because Su Ke had been lurking for too long. Of course, the ending was that Her Majesty killed all the troops in ambush and sat silently on a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. She killed Su Ke with her own hands and chopped off his head. Why did Su Ke not forget his former lord and even give up a bright future? It was because his former lord appeared and trained him vigorously. She even gave Su Ke an important task that allowed him to walk out of the abyss. Su Ke valued his reputation very much. This point hadn't changed in his previous life. Wei Xi didn't suspect him at first. After all, Suke had been taking care of the rear all these years and worked hard for his lord. Who would suspect him? It wasn't until his lord's words before he left that Wei Xi realized that things might be more serious than he thought. He couldn't help but overturn all his previous guesses and put everyone on the list of suspects. On this basis, he asked himself a question. If these people wanted to rebel, who was the most likely to control the overall situation without causing chaos? It couldn't be Qiguan Rang, Yang Xi, Feng Zhen, Han Yu, Fu Wang Liyun or Jiang Nongqin. These were all important ministers of the Lord. They had outstanding performances in certain aspects, but none of them could do this. Only Suke had this ability. He seemed inconspicuous, but he controlled all the lifelines. Even if the Lord suddenly died, as long as Suke did not fall, the foundation of the entire organization would not collapse. Whoever he supported would be able to stabilize the situation. From this angle, Suke was the most suspicious. But Wei Xi could not think of any solid evidence that could prove that Suke was a suspect. He had no reason to betray them. If it was because he didn't have the opportunity to make a name for himself, and make a name for himself in front of others, he could just mention it to his lord. Would the Lord be stingy with these few opportunities? Would she disregard the wishes of her subjects and forcefully imprison them in a domain, so that they would not be able to develop? How could this be? Back then, Han Yu was Su Pei's #1 strategist. He was good at dispatching troops to war, but he was more suitable for legislation and writing books. When the Lord supported him to develop in this direction, she also carefully sought Han Yu's opinion. Only then did Han Yu gradually reduce his activity at the front lines. But if he really wanted to go to the front lines, the Lord would not refute his request. Even Han Yu was like this, let alone Suke. Wei Xi was very conflicted. Jiang Pingji was in danger at the moment. He could not suppress his worry, but he had to control his bad habit of suspecting everyone. The more he couldn't suppress his suspicion, the more suspicious he was, and the more paranoid he became. Cheng Jing saw that Wei Xi's eyebrows were full of worry and asked, "You suddenly mention this. Is there something wrong with Suke?" Wei Xi smiled bitterly and said, "Maybe I'm being paranoid." There were contradictions and things wrong with Suke, but it was not enough to prove that he had betrayed them. If Suke found out that she made wild guesses without any evidence, the relationship between them would completely collapse, and they would never see each other again. Cheng Jing said, "It's not necessarily being paranoid." Wei Xi, he said meaningfully, "Lord Jiang seems to be on guard against Suke." Wei Xi's face turned pale. Cheng Jing said, "I've said before that Lord Jiang is the most perceptive. How could she not find out what Suke is missing? Based on her temperament, how could she tolerate her subordinates suffering such grievances? She has considered everyone, so there's no reason for her to skip Suke, who she should not have neglected." Wei Xi's heart skipped a beat, and his hands on his knees trembled slightly. Cheng Jing shook his head and said, "But as you said, there's no evidence. No matter how we speculate, it seems like we're being paranoid." The real solution to his doubts would have to wait until the moment when the mystery was revealed. "Zixiao, is something big going to happen recently?" Wei Xi raised his head and met his senior's eyes. For a moment, he felt like he was seen through, and all the secrets in his heart were exposed in front of him. He looked away unnaturally. "No. If it's really nothing, based on your temperament, how could you let your imagination run wild and even suspect an important official like Suke? Not everyone was as broad-minded as the sea. Some bottom lines should not be crossed. Once they were crossed, they would offend the other person to the utmost." Wei Xi could not understand this. The only possibility was that he had discovered something, and that was why he was distressed. Wei Xi still shook his head and refused to say another word. He had almost forgotten his senior's ability to see through people's minds and get information out of them. Choosing to talk to him today was a mistake. Cheng Jing said, "If you really have doubts, then don't let your guard down." Before leaving, Cheng Jing raised his hand and patted Wei Xi's shoulder, encouraging him in a low voice. Compared to Suke, he trusted his junior brother more. Wei Ci suspected that there was something wrong with Su Ku, so there must be some unspeakable reason. Have you sent the things over? Master Yuanjing was sitting in the corridor helping his wife curl wool. When he heard that his eldest disciple had returned, he raised his head and asked, "Yes, they've been sent over. Looking at your expression, you seem to be troubled. Did something happen to your junior?" Cheng Jing did not want to reveal more about what Wei Ci had said. He only said, "Recently, I've been learning about astronomical phenomena from my teacher, and I've had some enlightenment." What enlightenment? Tell me about it. Cheng Jing deliberated. "I'm afraid that Jiang Jun's road to becoming emperor is not very smooth." Master Yuanjing nodded and praised him. "Looks like he's learning well." Master's wife was angry. "What kind of treasonous words are you two talking about?" Master Yuanjing sighed. "I'm just saying that there were some twists and turns, not that he failed miserably. How can this be considered treasonous?" Master's wife snorted and snatched the ball of wool from him. She got up and went to the kitchen to see how the meal was being prepared, leaving them some space. "Teacher, you mean?" Master Yuanjing said. "The Emperor's star is indeed facing a murderous situation, but we should still believe in him. He's the child of destiny after all." Cheng Jing said, "If that's the case, why didn't you warn Jiang Jun to make early preparations?" Master Yuanjing curled his lips. The murderous situation was also set by Jiang Jun to wait for the tigers and wolves to enter. Why would I warn him? Cheng Jing was speechless. "I suddenly regret supporting you two brothers to enter officialdom. Having a ruler like this, life will not be easy if you have the slightest bit of disloyalty. It was not good to be too shrewd. Who knew when one would be tricked?" Chapter 1826. Cheng Jing smiled and said, "Our juniors are all proud and arrogant. How can they be willing to serve a mediocre and incompetent leader?" Whether it was Wei Ci, Yang Si, Han Yu Lu Zheng, or the other juniors who became officials one after another but were not well known, who didn't have the ambition to help the right path and make a name for themselves. Their reasons for becoming an official were different. Some wanted to bring honor to their ancestors. Some wanted to leave a good name for generations to come. Some wanted to cleanse the turbid world. And some simply wanted to practice their own morals. In the end, they all wanted to achieve the same goal. They wanted to realize their ideals, and needed a wise ruler with unparalleled talent. A mediocre ruler could not suppress these people. What Master Yuanjing said about the underwear was true. However, one was willing to be beaten, and one was willing to be beaten. Everyone was willing to be beaten. It would be a tragedy and misfortune if they entrusted their talents to a mediocre, or even muddle-headed leader. Master Yuanjing muttered. "That's what you say, but Lord Jiang is different." Cheng Jing asked, "What's different?" Master Yuanjing smiled and said, "Everything is different." Cheng Jing complained in frustration. "Teacher, you're playing this kind of riddle with your student again." Master Yuanjing laughed. As his smile deepened, his smile lines became more prominent. He looked more and more like a sly old fox. "I made a prediction a while ago. Guess what I predicted?" Master Yuanjing pretended to make a prediction, and tried to arouse his disciple's curiosity. However, his disciple had grown up and was not as gullible as when he was young. Master Yuanjing could only reveal the riddle. "In a few months at most, it will be a great opportunity for you to become an official. How about it? Are you happy? Disciple, are you ready?" Cheng Jing's face darkened slightly. He suddenly understood what Master Yuanjing was hinting at. When Huang Song was defeated and captured, Cheng Jing also became a prisoner. Jiang Pingji and Wei Ci both wanted Cheng Jing to become an official, but Cheng Jing said that he wanted to wait for Jiang Pingji to prove that she was a legitimate genius. Master Yuanjing said so. Did it mean that the world was only united for a few months? He asked, "Is there really no change in Lord Zhang's ascension?" Master Yuanjing said, "The Emperor's star is attacked from both sides. The heavens are in chaos, and changes can happen at any time. However, Lady Jiang has come from a humble background to where she is today. Why don't we believe that she can win all the way? Those with perseverance will be able to achieve great things that ordinary people can't." Cheng Jing wanted to say something, but stopped. Master Yuanjing smiled and stroked his beard. We are fortunate enough to be born in this era. It is truly a blessing to be able to witness her opening a new chapter in history as a witness. Cheng Jing looked at the smiling teacher and finally understood what the other party meant. Just watch the show and don't say anything. For some reason, Cheng Jing felt deep sympathy and worry for Jiang Pingji. Teacher, aren't you worried that if she loses, the world will really change? Master Yuanjing looked at the night sky and sneered. Life is short. I am an old man now. How many years do I have left to live? Even if the heavens really change, so what? When this master takes his last breath and is buried in the yellow earth, how can the dead care about the living? Cheng Jing. Smiley face. Angle. What he said sounded quite reasonable. But his disciples still had many years to live. They couldn't be at ease. He shouldn't have come to look for his master that day. If he hadn't looked for his master, he wouldn't have been ordered by his master's wife to deliver dried melon seeds to Wuxia. If he hadn't delivered dried melon seeds, he wouldn't have been caught by Wuxia to complain and hear such shocking news. If he hadn't heard such shocking news, he wouldn't have come back to chat with his master. If he hadn't chatted with his master, he wouldn't have felt uneasy. Epsilon equals omega asterisk. Sigh. Master Yuanjing also sighed like his students and said with emotion, let's just watch the deities fight. Maybe one day when they woke up, the deities would have finished fighting. Master Yuanjing knew some inside information, but it was limited to some. Other than being a spectator, he could do nothing else. In this regard, his attitude was the same as Lu Shi's. Even the words they spoke were the same. Cheng Jing. The ignorant and the knowledgeable were the happiest. The former didn't know anything and naturally didn't need to worry. The latter knew everything and didn't need to worry. The most pitiful was the one who didn't know anything. For example, he felt as if there were feathers tickling his heart. However, Master Yuanjing wasn't willing to reveal more. Cheng Jing could only sigh and be a spectator. As the saying goes, when deities fight, no one knows when it will start and when it will end. Smiley face. Angle. Then the question was, what was the point of letting him spy on the inside information? Other than pointless worry. Was there any other practical use? The only use was probably to delay half a chapter, so that the author with terminal laziness could laze around for another day. Nay. Half a month later, the great Princess Jiang Lian walked more steadily. Not only could she jog 2 or 3 steps without falling, but she could also jump twice on the spot. That day, she was covered in dust from rolling outside. When she was tired, she was ready to harass her sister. As soon as she entered the house, she found that there was a white and chubby little thing next to her sister. The other party was clinging to her sister. Her possessive highness Lian ran a few steps and pounced on the person. She hugged the person and rolled twice. Her little face showed a little fierceness. The fierce-looking highness Lian made a threatening gesture with her teeth. Her chubby finger pointed at the second prince and shouted, "My nene." The little thing was dizzy from rolling. It was also pressed down by the sturdy first prince. It immediately cried out in grievance. The maid was already frightened by the first prince's action, but she didn't dare to go forward and pull the angry highness Lian away. For a moment, the hall was filled with the loud cry of a child. Teardrops fell down one by one. Her highness Lian still refused to soften her attitude. She clenched her fist and waved it in front of the other party. It was very threatening. Your highness, this is the second son of the Feng family. You can't hurt him." The maids were so scared that they knelt down. The maid plucked up the courage to go forward and beg for mercy. However, how would the 1-year-old highness Lian know who the second son of the Feng family was? She only saw a guy clinging to her sister. She pointed at the second prince confidently and repeated, "My nene." The maid didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the first prince's domineering blade. The second prince was naturally the first prince's sister. This was something that even a blind person knew. "This Feng Erlang is the second prince's friend," the maid repeated, hoping that the first prince would restrain himself. The first prince didn't understand what a friend was, but he felt that it wasn't a good word. Wasn't the sister hers? How did it become someone else's? The usually cheerful first prince pursed his lips in grievance when he heard this. Tears welled up in his eyes and rolled down. When the maid saw this, her head became bigger. She could only subconsciously send a signal for help to the second prince. She hoped that the source of the dispute between the two children could come and clean up the mess. Unexpectedly, the other party just sat there and watched the show. Feng Erlang cried loudly. The first prince only cried but didn't howl. Hearing his loud voice, she also learned to cry. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1827. For a moment, the two children's high and low cries came out of the hall, alarming Wei Xi, who came to teach. What happened? As soon as Wei Xi came over, the first prince, who was howling loudly to suppress Feng Erlang, immediately stopped, got up and ran to Wei Xi. However, she only knew short and repetitive words, unable to accurately express the meaning of someone trying to snatch her sister. She was so anxious that her little face turned red. Wei Xi looked up and saw a strange boy in the hall. His expression froze. Who is this character? The maid said. The second Lang Jun of the Feng family. Wei Xi frowned. Feng Erlang? Feng Yu? Why is he here? His eyes fell on the sobbing boy who was silently crawling towards the second prince. His calm eyes seemed to be raging with a storm. The little guy seemed to feel it. He shrunk his shoulders and wanted to bury himself in the second prince's arms like an ostrich. However, he was dressed too much and looked white and fat. A 2-year-old child could not be covered by the second prince. Why is he here? The maid said with a strange expression. I don't know what happened to the second prince today. He was clamoring to go out of the front hall. As soon as he went out, he found Feng Erlang at the corner of the street. If it wasn't for his identity written on the longevity lock on his neck, I wouldn't have known who he was. The second prince seemed to find him interesting and dragged him back. After the first prince came back, perhaps he suspected that Feng Erlang was a criminal, so he made a fuss. Wei Xi lowered his eyes and asked, Did you send someone to inform the Feng residents? The maid said, Yes, the Feng residents really lost Erlang. The servant who came to pick up the child was still waiting in the small room in the side hall, but the second prince refused to let him go. Wei Xi sneered, Such a big residence, can't even watch over a 2-year-old child. Useless. The maid heard the word useless, and was surprised. She would not be surprised if this word came from anyone's mouth, except Wei Xi. Wei Xi was famous for his good temper, and he was even more famous for being a gentleman. When would he say this? The second prince seemed to feel something and pointed to Feng Erlang. Mine. The first prince was even more upset. The tears that he had just stopped fell again. The second prince came over and patted her head, comforting her. You are also mine. The first prince's tears were like a faucet that stopped. She hugged the second prince and bared her teeth at Feng Erlang, who was curled up in a ball. She raised her chin slightly, as if showing off. Look, this is her younger sister. Wei Xi's head hurt when he saw this, and the veins on his forehead bulged. His second daughter had a problem, and Feng Zhen's second son wasn't easy to deal with. Feng Zhen's mansion was 4 streets away from here. How did a 2-year-old child manage to get there? By rolling. Erlang Day. Today class. Feng Erlang was especially attached to the second prince, and vowed to share the same bed with her. The prince also saw the second, and wanted to occupy the seat. She was naturally domineering and directly hugged the second prince. If Fingerling dared to approach, she would bare her teeth and threaten him with her fists. Feng the two, the Ci and the Ci. Prince as the femme fatale that the 2 naughty children were fighting over. The second prince showed an expression of despair. To be honest, the 2 babies were indeed very cute, but if they made too much of a fuss, they would become little devils. It was more comfortable to look at them when they were well behaved. So she patted Fingerlang's head, and the child, who had tried to resist just now, immediately became obedient. Stop fooling around. Let's go to class. The first prince glared at Feng Erlang, who was pretending to be obedient, and followed his sister to listen to the lesson. It was rare that the eldest prince did not fall asleep even after Wei Xi's lecture ended. Instead, he used his childish and fierce gaze to guard against Feng Erlang. From the beginning to the end, Feng Erlang maintained an obedient, innocent and pure expression. Wei Xi dismissed his servants and maids. The female official also sat outside the hall and waited. Wei Xi said coldly, "Does Feng Zhen know?" Feng Erlang blinked his eyes. The second prince sat upright, and the first prince was on his guard as usual. Wei Xi. Not a single response. Did they think he was performing a one-man show? After a long while, the second prince finally moved his butt and changed into a more comfortable sitting position. "He is my..." The second prince looked straight into Wei Xi's eyes. Although he did not speak fluently, his pronunciation was very clear. Wei Xi clenched the book in his hand. The second prince swallowed his saliva. He would salivate if he said a long sentence, so he had to stop and suck in his saliva halfway through to avoid embarrassment. "Child. Did you hear that? The little brother under her protection." Feng Erlang, who was pretending to be innocent and well-behaved, straightened his chest. But because he leaned forward, the Empress Dowager's center of gravity shifted, and he accidentally fell backward and rolled twice. After a long while, Wei Xi sighed and asked, "Is there any danger?" The second prince said, my man, there is no danger." Wei Xi asked her again, "Does the Lord know?" The second prince nodded. Wei Xi said, "Fine, let him come over every day to accompany your highness to relieve your boredom." Speaking of which, his life had been magnificent. He had been reborn. In his previous life, his wife was the empress, his eldest daughter was the empress, and his second son had tried to force the empress to abdicate. In this life, his wife was still the empress, his eldest daughter would also become the next empress, and his second daughter had a secret. The Yenyu couple was also not the original. Hearing the second prince's affirmative answer, Wei Xi's first reaction was actually to rejoice. Feng Yu changed his core, and his eldest daughter from his previous life did not have to be cuckolded _smiley face, angle, _congratulations. The Yenyu couple was also stable, and the stock price rose delightfully. What the hell? Although he knew that the current Jiang Yan was not his daughter, after all, she had his blood. Even if she was not one, she was still half. He had not been guarding his half-daughter for long, and Feng Yu, the official wife, was haunting him. Don't think that you are not Feng Yu just because you changed your core. Sir. The second prince saw that Wei Xi's expression was not very good, and could not help but ask with concern. If anything happened to Wei Xi, Jiang Pingji would come back and chop her into pieces. Smiley face, angle, no nothing, just a little heartache. He just remembered the psychological trauma that Feng Yu brought to him in his previous life. Wei Xi waved his hand, and Feng Erlang felt a chill down his spine. He was so scared that he shrank his shoulders, and could not help but want to hide behind the second prince. The second prince said, "He is very cute." Wei Xi was speechless. He could not tell, but he felt that he looked disgusting. The second prince patted Feng Erlang's head and gave him a look. Feng Erlang could only walk to Wei Xi's side, shrunk his head, and did not speak. "He wants to stay with you for a while. They were going to start a team battle, and he had to protect us. Otherwise, if the enemy took the first blood of us, our main damage output would collapse _smiley face, angle, Wei Xi was puzzled, and he lowered his head to meet Feng Erlang's eyes. Feng Erlang was very timid, but he still bravely nodded. "What's going on?" Wei Xi asked. The second prince touched the first prince's head. The soft hair felt so good. "It's about to start." The second prince said meaningfully, "He can protect you." Wei Xi was speechless. He suddenly reached out his hand, and Feng Erlang was grabbed by the back of his collar. Feng Erlang, who was staring innocently, was speechless. Wei Xi held the cute dumpling, and he doubted that he had heard wrong. Him? Protect me? Daily Doubting Life JPG. Wei Xi had wasted all kinds of conspiracy theories and analysis testimonies for the past few days, but the result was such a funny beginning. Genius. 1 second to remember this website address. Mobile version, M. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.